The next response is by the Chair, Defense and Foreign Relations, Honorable Kato Matito, to a request for statement by the member for Kikuyu, the Honorable Kimani Chungwa, who has been running like Omanya.
Traveling to China. It also involved the Department of Immigration, which is domiciled under the Ministry of Interior National Coordination, because it was asking about the work permits, it was asking about visas to people who have traveled to China. It has also an element of the Department of KRA in the Ministry of Finance, because it was asking about departments, that is Immigration, Ministry of Health, and also an element of Foreign Affairs. Those ones have been responded to, and that is why it is lengthy, 11 pages. Kindly allow me to table.
Very well, I think you can table it. The Honorable Ishongwa, had you looked at the response?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I indeed got a copy of the response this morning. Honorable Speaker, as much as I agree with the Chair of the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee, that there are issues that are cross-cutting, especially on issues to do with immigration, and I'm happy that data has been provided, indeed, from the Department of Immigration, that shows that slightly above 200 Kenyans only have been able to access the People's Republic of China in the last 1 year. On the converse, Honorable Speaker, close to 3,000 Chinese nationals have been able to access our boundaries, our borders, and do and transact business in this country, Honorable Speaker. And indeed, Honorable Speaker, some of the issues I had raised, as much as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs could be trying to run away from them, but of course, Speaker, you are aware that there are trade attaches in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in each and every embassy of our Republic, Honorable Speaker. And indeed, some of the data that they claim they could not get, including data on the volume of trade being transacted by Kenyan nationals from China, and that has been transacted by Chinese nationals, Honorable Speaker. That, Honorable Speaker, I find very dissatisfying, because it is data that is easily available. Honorable Speaker, again, I raised this question in mid-August, Honorable Speaker, actually on the 19th of August, today on the 21st of September. And I'm aware the committee did not meet with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs yesterday. Therefore, to purport to be hiding behind KRA, Honorable Speaker, is indeed unsatisfactory. But it points, Honorable Speaker, I think the key things that we should, and I expected the Chair and the committee to address with the ministry, are the hurdles that are stopping Kenyan businessmen and women from being able to access the Chinese market and be able to travel to China. Of course, from the statement, Honorable Speaker, when the Chair tables his members will be able to see, there is a contention that this is the way it is around the world. But, Honorable Speaker, the committee being the committee that is oversighting the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there is what Honorable Kato calls reciprocity, Honorable Speaker, in relations between countries. And it is both on issues that touch on, Speaker, it is not fair, and it is indeed very insensitive of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be telling us that this is what is happening around the world, but at the same time tabling documents here that are showing slightly above 3,500, I think, and 48 Chinese nationals, if I remember the figures, I don't have the document here, Honorable Speaker, have been able to access our country, do business in this country, ship goods from China into our economy, and only 200 Kenyans have been able to travel back to China in the last 1 year, Honorable Speaker. If it is about reciprocity that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs speaks about, then there must be fairness and equity. If it is COVID protocols, Honorable Speaker, we must be able to reciprocate to the People's Republic of China how they treat Kenyan nationals. Even their own nationals must get the same treatment in this country, Honorable Speaker. Otherwise, we're encouraging this country, Honorable Speaker, and making our people look like we are now becoming a colony of the People's Republic of China. Kenya is a sovereign state, Honorable Speaker, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and this government must be at the forefront of protecting the interests of the Kenyan people and Kenyan business people, Honorable Speaker, not Chinese nationals and their business, Honorable Speaker.
Let me suggest, Honorable Ishongwa.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Because I have my view is that the Honorable Kato may not be able to respond to the issues you were raising. That since Honorable Kato had said that the Kenya Revenue Authority had requested 2 more weeks, then you schedule a meeting, Honorable Kato, so that actually the minister, they are not called ministers, they are called CSs, so that the CS appears in person before your committee, and then the Honorable Ichung'wa can, canvass the issues that he is raising, because we may not know whether, when you talk about reciprocity, whether it is on what quantum, is it on ratio? If the population of Kenya be about 50-something million and they are 1.4 billion, perhaps, then you can canvass those issues properly. The Cabinet Secretary will come with all the technical people. And indeed, Honorable Kato, you can actually request the Cabinet Secretary to come with those others from the other departments of government as the coordinating ministry, since the matter really still rests within the Foreign Affairs docket. I think, Honorable Ishongwa, that would be a better way so that you can actually go and raise those issues. They are pertinent, and I think it would be of great interest for Kenyans to understand from the Cabinet Secretary whether that 200 vis-a-vis 3,548 is what the ratio.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I'm well guided. But maybe just to mention before the House, Honorable Speaker, indeed, what you say is true. The Chinese population compared to ours, that might be a justifiable cause. But what I expect the chair and the committee to address is
things in the correct perspective. During this COVID season, 788 Kenyans traveled to China, as opposed to what my good friend is saying, 200. But the 200 is talking about, because exactly there are 242. Those are Kenyans who are not able to meet the very strict restrictions of the Chinese government. They were not able to travel because the restrictions were very strict, 242. Those who met, who applied and met the condition, there are 788. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, the thing I wanted to put into the correct perspective is the fact that we do not have trade attaches as a country in all our missions abroad. Very, very few of them have, actually very, if any even. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the issue of trade, because this narrows down to...
the Honorable Kato, the Honorable Ishong'wa was the chair of Budget and Appropriation Committee.
Yes.
And they may not have traveled a lot. So I'm sure he is not aware of that. It is a reality, as you are saying.
Exactly. And again, in fact, we have been conversing on the floor of this House for the need to have trade attaches in those missions abroad that we see they have economic value. And I'm happy because, Mr. Speaker, the other thing I wanted to say is that trade matters, they are not under my committee, and they are not under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There is a substantive ministry called the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade that handles international trade. They are oversighted in this House by the Committee on Trade and Cooperatives. And I'm happy because the immediate former chairman of that committee is currently the chair of budget. And he has actually been moving this House into agreeing for us to have a budget, to have trade attaches in our missions abroad. So I really don't know if it is about trade volumes. I don't know whether it is my committee or the Committee on Trade which is supposed to handle this question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, the minister will come, or the Cabinet Secretary will come to respond to the issues, so that the Honorable Ishong'wa can ask any further supplementaries on on the response as given, because I think with 11 pages it's going to be taken forever to handle. Order number 5, so that we can get the chair. Read it out, order number 5. Read it.
Order number 5, papers.
So we have the chairman, Public Investments Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I want to apologize. It is unlike me to be late. But, Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Wednesday, September 22nd, afternoon sitting, report of the Public Investment Committee on its consideration of the special audit report on utilization of COVID-19 funds by the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority, KEMSA.
Oral. The chairperson, Select Committee on National Government Constituencies Development Fund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also wish to apologize for coming late. Mr. Speaker, I was involved at the office of the President where I was held up. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021, afternoon sitting. A report of the Select Committee on National Government Constituency Development Fund on outstanding funds payable to the National Government Constituency Development Fund by the National Treasury. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Chairman, Departmental Committee on Labor and Social Welfare.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I also want to apologize for turning in late this afternoon. It's unlike me. I had an official meeting that ran up to very late this afternoon. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Wednesday, September 21st, 2021, after Committee on Labor and Social Welfare on its consideration of the Breastfeeding Mothers Bill, Bill number 74 of 2019. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Again, go to order number 6 to allow 2 of the chairs to give notices.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Honorable Abdul Swamad, Chair of Public Investments Committee.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to give notice of the following motion, that this House adopts the report of the Public Investment Committee on its consideration of the Special Audit Report on Utilization of COVID-19 Funds by the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority laid on the table of this House on Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021.
The Honorable Amunyinyi.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. I beg to give notice of the following motion, that this House adopts the report of the Select Committee on National Government Constituency Development Fund on the outstanding funds payable to the National Government Constituency Development Fund by the National Treasury, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, September 22, the year 2021. I thank
that concludes both orders number 5 and 6. But on order number 7, now for the third time, questioned by the Honorable Joseph Limo, member for Kipkelion East. In fairness, that and he wanted the question, he needed a written reply. Since he is absent, not desiring to be present, the question is dropped. On responses, again, the Chair of Administration and National Security has chosen to, or he's made his way. But he wasn't there when we called out first. Honorable Mwadi, you are to give a response to a request to a statement by the Honorable Gideon Keter. He is here. He is there.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I apologize for coming late. I haven't before, but I got stuck in jam. But thank you for giving me the second chance. And Honorable Speaker, I wish then to read the statement that on Thursday, 19th August 2021, the nominated Member of Parliament, Honorable Gideon Keter, MP, sought for a statement from the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government on the increased killings of young people in the country. In particular, the member sought to be informed on the following. 1, the status of investigations in the killing of the said young men, namely Benson Jiro Ndwiga, Emmanuel Mtuta Ndwiga, Moses Kimathi Njiru, Fred Muriithi, Victor Mwangi, Mike George, Nicholas Musa, and Emmanuel Kipkoech Rono. 2, whether any of the government investigating agencies have managed the motives for the murders and whether any suspects have been apprehended and brought to book. And 3, the measures the government has taken to inquire into the matter to ensure such incidences are handled with urgency and whether the police techniques to enable them diffuse situations, especially where suspects are not armed, and how often the security personnel undertake refresher courses. And finally, the measures ministry has put in place to ensure that affected families are duly compensated for the pain and suffering brought on with the loss of lives of their loved ones, and within which timelines the families of the deceased will be compensated. And the response is as follows, Honorable Speaker. The National Police was established by Article 243 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 and operationalized by the National Police Service Act 2011, with the protection of life as a function that cuts across the services that make up the National Police Service. National Police Service operates within and all its officers are subject to investigations. They presented their findings to the Director of Public Prosecution, who concluded that the officers who were on duty on the fateful day were criminally responsible for the deaths and thus recommended that they be prosecuted. So far, 6 officers have answered to murder charges, with further 2 being processed to answer for the same. Mr. Speaker, on this matter, you are aware there is a specific request of statement by the Honorable Eric Mushangi, and I have since received a response. But I am counter-checking certain facts and seeking further clarification before I present it to this House. Honorable Speaker, in respect to the killing of the young men in Kitengela, investigations were carried out and one suspect who was the mastermind of the attack was arrested and has been presented to court to answer 4 counts of murder and malicious damage to property. More suspects are being sought and will likely be charged crime management concepts and various legislations which they enforce. Lectures and drills are also conducted on regular basis at their stations and camps to keep them updated. Honorable Speaker, on the issue of compensation, the ministry has no funds to compensate the affected families. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Ketel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, while I acknowledge the response by the chairperson, I wish to know that there is one particular case I singled out in my request that has not been mentioned at all. The case of a Form 2 student, Mr. Emmanuel Kipkoech Rono, who was killed by a police at Kiptagich in Kuresoi South, Nakuru County. This is a very unfortunate incident. The loss of such innocent young person should concern us. The Cabinet Secretary and the IG of Police should provide detailed information on this killing as a matter of urgency. On the issue of compensation, government should the duty of government is to protect life. Where cases like this happen, morally and legally, the government should take responsibility and compensate the victims. Thank you.
Anything, does the chair wish to say anything? Those are just part of the wish list. Just put your, I don't know more, they put your intervention button.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And I want to concur with Honorable Gideon that there may have been an oversight on the actual details of the death of Emmanuel Rono, which I promise when I'm bringing the statement, which was sought by Honorable Eric Mushangi, I can include that one.
Very well.
Thank you.
Honorable Milemba.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and with humility, I did not really want to intervene, but I realized that when the statement was being answered, there's a statement with finality that the government does not have money to compensate the victims. And you remember the sentimental and emotional way the two boys were buried. I thought even the owner of the statement should have interrogated further so that a window is opened. Yes, if that particular department is not having money for compensation, but what other ways, window, is there for such a compensation? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
I imagine just imagine that the window available would be the judicial process. Because it's only through that one may, because government may even come up with some proposals for compensating families or relatives of those that may have been killed, but maybe the quantum may not be sufficient until maybe there's a judicial pronouncement on that, or perhaps, maybe, but I don't know whether the ministry considers that. It's something that needs to be maybe perhaps the ministry could think of it. Honorable Pukose, you want to say something on that?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to thank the chair for responding. Listening to the response, Honorable Speaker, and I was actually thinking on the judicial process of appeal, but when you look at many of the families, they are not able to afford the legal fees because more often you need a lawyer to be able to take up this matter. And we have an independent police oversight authority. Unfortunately, I think the independent police oversight authority, I think we need as a house to look at the law that operationalize it, because more often we've raised similar cases and asked the IPOA to come and do investigations. But after they have done the investigations, they are not able to deliver anything. And you wonder whether IPOA is just in that office, people are just enjoying salary and they are ineffective. So some of those bodies like IPOA, I know maybe in the BBI something was being looked into the IPOA, but I think IPOA maybe it might need to be one of those bodies that is not effective and needs to be, as a house, we do away with it and create a mechanism for which people can seek redress in these matters. Because for the time IPOA has been there, I don't think they have achieved anything. So for me, I think we should be able to examine the law that created IPOA so that something can be done about it. It's very frustrating. I have appealed to IPOA, they come there, and they are not able to, they cannot be able to deliver anything. They are ineffective. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Maybe they are not the only ones. There are several other commissions which all you see is just seminars, workshops, then some. The rest is just fuel guzzlers hovering all over here, carrying this chairperson, this one or the other, commissioner of this, commissioner of the other, and then budget time comes. Remember, the Constitution itself places an obligation on the National Assembly to fund them. So you not deny them funding. The member for the Raka wishes to weigh in.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I agree that the avenue available to the aggrieved parents and parties is through the judicial process. But what is of great worry to this House and to the piling up unsatisfied judgments against the government, and as we speak today, we are just about to reach $1 trillion of such amounts. So in as much as we are advising these aggrieved parties and families to go to court and get judgments, it is almost certain that those judgments will not be satisfied and they'll just be paper judgments, paper decrees, and nothing more. I think we need to find a way of ensuring that the government has sufficient funds to satisfy all judgments and to do it in a manner that is fair and just and equitable, and not to selectively choose which judgment to satisfy against other judgments. So really, this is not of any help to these families unless there is a clear policy on the satisfaction of judgments against the government.
And as a senior member of the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs, I think you should seek to know how many judgments are there, how many decrees have been issued against government and have not been settled or have not been, the owners haven't been enjoyed, and then try to look at them historically so that when you come to budgeting, then you can also priority say that this was decreed 20 years ago, because I know I'm aware that there are some which are very old. They have not been satisfied. There are others which were done just a few months ago and they have been sorted out. So the criteria used to settle is also questionable. But because you, in terms of Article 95, you are the ones who exercise oversight over all those state organs, including the office of the Attorney General and the Attorney General himself as a state officer. You, as the National Assembly, exercise oversight authority over them, and also you commence the process of removing them from those offices. So please, you have the power, but if you don't exercise it, people, Kenyans will not even know actually you have, many Kenyans don't know that you have that power. That actually you can come and decree that this judgment is 30 years old. Because it belongs to some unknown Kenyan out there, they languish in misery. Nobody to turn to. Yet, this is the House with the power and mandate to resort to the kazi kwenu. Honorable Nyikal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To a large extent, the persons will be found guilty, they'll be jailed, or whatever happens to them. Quite often, there's actually need for another process to start for actually seeking compensation for the government. So I think that is where really the weakness is. And even when judgment is given, and normally you would the officers during the budget process. So as you just rightly said, we're leaving our people open while there are actually ways that we can enforce through this house to make sure that people get compensation when they're aggrieved. Many people just give and say, if it is against the government, I don't waste my time. Even if I get compensation, nobody will pay me. And you know, I think by law, it's not even very possible to go and attach government property.
Yes.
That's another way we should look, that actually we should allow people to attach government property if they're not paying just like anybody else. So I think this is an area that they can help and even bring legislation and that can help people in these matters. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Maybe because, yeah, the Honorable Nikal says it, there is a law called the Government Proceedings Act. Now, perhaps we'll get a few people in the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee to weigh in. Even as I charged the committee to also give us a report on the Wakfu bill. Honorable Sankok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And I also have a different opinion, Honorable Speaker. Because we have insurance to all officers and government officers who get injured in the line of duty. What about if also we have an insurance cover paid by the government in case a police officer injure a citizen or destroy properties of the citizen, so that at least we can also have them covered? Honorable Speaker, you are the third in command and you can only go to second or first. When you become one of them, please assist us in making sure that we have an insurance cover to all those citizens who may have been maimed, by police brutality and such, Honorable Speaker. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. We really need that insurance cover.
To need some legal anchor, which in terms of Article 94 can only be done by Parliament. So either way, it is you, members of Parliament, particularly actually in the...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A few matters emerged from the Department on Security, the statement. Straight away, I would say we would interact with the Attorney General urgently, but I want to remind the House that the Attorney General is just a conduit. The funding for compensation goes to the principal ministries, in this case, the Office of the President. So he will not be able to carry per case to him. He doesn't let the funds stay with him. As soon as they are brought to him, they are disbursed immediately. What could happen, and I have been this, I have had experience in this matter of compensation as a lawyer. Some people, there is some favoritism in the OP that you get some cases, skip the others. So actually the Attorney General has no say on these matters, but we will deal with this matter. We will interact with the Attorney General, remind him about the concern of the House. The second matter I would like to address would, there is a matter that was mentioned about IPOA. I think the cure to this malaise of IPOA just looking as a white elephant is that some of these prosecutorial matter, jurisdiction should be given to those bodies, particularly IPOA, to prosecute matters that are specifically arising from police misconduct. Right? But this would, of course, need registration. My committee also will look into this. What I found a bit fallacious is when my colleague here spoke about in his statement, he says the police all the time act within the law. I found that a bit atrocious, particularly when I watched a case, I think 2 days, it's been going on repeatedly in the media, about 2 young people or children who died in Nakuru. The police have already issued statements saying the father poisoned. These children were poisoned by the father, right? They have no evidence to this effect. Yeah? Any stranger would come and do that and leave medicine around. Right? So some of these things, some of these matters are preempted by the police. Right? The evidence that was emerging is that the doctor himself has free to know from his own, from the people who know him, that he loves his children and he's not of this type of fellow to execute such a horrendous act. I'm told he has already died. So some of these things, misfortune, from that is a misconduct. And if you look around, I'm trying to research on the number of people who have been killed by the police in the last 1 year. It is a daily occurrence. So when that statement talks about the police acting within the law, it is absolutely laughable in Kenya. Looking at what is happening in Kayole, what is happening in Huruma, what is happening in Dadola, everyday demonstrations against police stations. Because of people, we see this person has been killed. And every time they say, no, he is not killed by the police. So I think we need to relook. The Committee on Security and my committee should perhaps join forces to see what legislation do we need to effect to give the EPOA jurisdiction to prosecute matters concerning police specifically. Just like we used to have, SSF, we used to have prosecutorial matter jurisdiction, even immigration. Up to today, immigration has some nature of prosecutorial jurisdiction. So we'll deal with this. You raise the matter of WAF. I think I will not come to it now, but I had already requested the leader of majority to study it down because my committee has not come up, unfortunately, it has not come up with its own report. Particularly, we need to interact with the public trustee, with the public.
There have been members who have been following what is the fate of this bill, because it's a 2019 bill, particularly the Muslim fraternity. So those who profess the Muslim faith now know it is not the House Business Committee that is sitting on the bill, but after 2 weeks, the bill will find its way into the order paper. What is out of order? Honorable Raso, what is your point of order? I wanted us to finish with this, the matter to which the Honorable Mwadi was responding before we come to the others. I know, Honorable Mili, you have an issue. I've acceded to it.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I wanted to actually speak to both. The Waqf bill is almost going to the third year. And what has not been done over 3 years, I am afraid if 2 weeks will actually be enough for it to be finalized. But I think with your wisdom, they may manage those 2 weeks if they didn't manage 3 years. But on the issue that was raised by Honorable Keter, listening to the chair responding to that question, I was a bit disappointed because on the face of it, actually the response was very thin. The issue of the two young men who were gunned down in Embu actually tickled the national psyche in this country. That two young men who could just have been arrested, given a cash bail of 1,000 to appear in court or in police station, could just disappear and later on to be found in mortuaries. Honorable Speaker, the issue of compensation, as you rightly said, sometimes we as this House, we may not be doing the right things to assist this country. If you followed the issue of George Floyd, the American who was killed by the policeman, actually the state said, since the police are servants of the state said the family will be compensated. And I think if issues are in the public domain, captured on TV and even on the media, then we cannot run away to say that the state cannot compensate. There are issues, we must differentiate issues, really. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
On this one, let me hear now from the Honorable Dr. Otiende Amolo before the chair responds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the issue that was raised and responded to by the chair is actually not a light matter. Some of us remember, and some of us do not remember, that less than 3.5 years ago, we were in that situation where, because of political affiliations, many of those who support our side of the divide lost their lives, indeed over 50. Mr. Speaker, the matter is actually was taken up in court, and it is still pending. The problem with the judicial avenue, first, is one of, I wish the chair could listen, and Honorable Millie Odhiambo. The judicial remedy is not really ideal for this. First, because of time. The time it takes to get to the bottom of such a matter judicially is way beyond what justice demands. Secondly is cost. It is very expensive to prosecute a matter of this nature. Thirdly is the fact, Mr. Speaker, as you've observed, that even after you get judgment, that judgment will pend for years. There are judgments that have now been pending for 4 decades. And lastly is because whether you get judgment or not, as Speaker, you observed, there's an express injunction against executing against government. So you will get that judgment, you will sit on it until one day, if Jesus comes back and the government has sympathy on you before you are taken, then you might be paid. So it's not a good avenue. It is true, Mr. Speaker, that there are other avenues that can be considered. There are avenues including going to the Kenya Human Rights Commission, going to the Office of the Ombudsman, and many people have taken those avenues because they are cheaper, they are faster, and you might get results. I think, Mr. Speaker, that what needs to be considered here is a scheme alongside what we have in terms of wildlife. When death is caused or injury is caused by the wildlife, there's a scheme of compensation under the Act. It is not sufficient, but it's a good beginning. So if we were to have a scheme that parallels that, in which wherever there's such injuries, at least there could be a starting point, it could perhaps help us a little bit. Now, Mr. Speaker, I have heard many people complain on this. Part of the problem is that there are many policemen who believe that if they injure you or even cause death, as long as they are not prosecuted and jailed, nothing will happen to them. Because if you are to sue, you will sue the state. If you are to be paid, you'll be paid by the state. So there's no personal loss. Until we bring that element of personal loss, then the restraint on the part of the police will not be there. But lastly, Mr. Speaker, as I've heard many people complain about some of the constitutional commissions and independent offices, it is true they have varying levels of success. I was myself there, and it is not for me to judge. But, Mr. Speaker, the truth is that we should introspect in this House. Because all these bodies, the persons who go to them pass through this house. We debate who is to be the chair. We debate who is to be a commissioner, who is to hold what independent office. But the tragedy is, most times when that debate comes, we don't debate objectively. We either debate from the prism of the party, or the prism of the tribe, or the prism of gender, or the prism of the profession, and therefore we stifle getting the best of what we can. We must be prepared to live with the fact that we can only do as well as we do here. If they are not working properly, then we need to re-examine how we appoint them through this house. I am one who believes that most of these offices are very important in a properly working democracy if they are presided over by the right people. But until we agree to get the right people, then we must also take some share of the blame.
Justice and legal affairs, because these matters of culpability and taking responsibility, they are matters that I think the committee should spearhead some legislative proposals to try and address them. Look at the police, is it called the Police Act? And see what, because it's not just right that people go and do whatever they choose, because they know they were under the cover of government. I think these are matters that, in fullness of time, I think the committee should initiate some moves. Sorry, I see the Honorable Kaunya wanted to say something before the chairman speaks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to make two comments. One, regarding the statement by Honorable Kose on the performance of IPOA. It's true, as alluded by a number of members, that some of these independent bodies and commissions have not performed to our expectation. But it is also true that considering the environment in which IPOA has been operating, they have been able to perform. But I think this House, Mr. Speaker, may need to be given a report of this performance so that members can know. For example, we all remember on Monday this week, on 20th, there were 5 police officers who were taken to court in the High Court in Nairobi for killing one Crispin Otieno in Changamwe, Mombasa. Crispin Otieno was arrested because he was suspected to have been carrying illicit brew. Mr. Speaker, there have been several incidences of such. But you would see that the speed at which IPOA moved and got the results and had the officers taken before the courts, that is something that is not easy within a short span. Mr. Speaker, there have been several other cases. I remember the case where I demanded a statement involving the killing of a young man in Malawi, in my constituency, and many others. But, Mr. Speaker, maybe on that, I would beg to disagree with the fact that they have done nothing. But it is true they need to perform to our expectation. Mr. Speaker, the second one, I would want to say that the question of police performance has quite a lot to do with also the environment in which police officers perform. And I think one of the things we found in the committee deliberations about 2 weeks ago was that a number of police officers are not facilitated. And I think it will be up to this House really to look at the budgeting, more so on the ground. If you find police stations where officers do not have vehicles, and they are unable to move to areas where action is taken, then it becomes a real problem. So, Mr. Speaker, whereas we will, of course, expect police to perform as expected, But we also need, on the other hand, to ensure that the ministries concerned, especially of Interior, and this House provides the resources necessary to ensure that the police officers perform in a motivated manner. There have been several cases we are examining the last 2 weeks, Mr. Speaker, about cases of suicides within the police. And we are saying this House provided some funds to start some counseling centers because there has not been any. And I think in this budget financial year, they have been provided for 2 counseling centers. And we hope that going forward, these cases can be reduced because they are human beings. And when they operate in difficult circumstances, you expect that you need that psychosocial support to be available. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to add those comments, but I do agree with what Honorable Kigano indicated, that there will be need perhaps to have the law on compensation made by this House so that we provide for that avenue, which is quicker and faster. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Mwadi, finally.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, I know most honorable members have spoken to the issue of the judicial process, how decrees are either honored or not honored, and in this case, when it is against the government, takes long. And of course, very importantly, that my colleague Honorable Kigano spoke about the review of the laws, which you also alluded to, Honorable Speaker, and which I think is the appropriate way to go so that we are able to tell how to handle this such cases, and so that we can reduce the suffering. Honorable Speaker, I was to compensate now without any law relating to the same, would quantify the quantum for each case in this matter, because you find that the people are of different ages and of course of different professions and understanding. So I think that needs to be agreed, that needs to be addressed by way of review of the law. And I am available, and the committee, of course, my committee is available, Honorable Mturi Kigano of JLAC, the chair JLAC, that we can put our heads together, and of course with the entire House. As to the issue of IPOA, Honorable Speaker, I have been in this committee now not for too long, but I know way before the DPP gave instructions for arrest of these officers, the chair IPOA shared with the committee their report, and which report they had actually indicated that and recommended that the 6 officers who finally were prosecuted were supposed to be prosecuted. That was way before the DPP acted. And what do their work because of very limited budgeting. And during the sector working group, they also need to stamp voice so that there is a budget line which is established. For some of these activities, they are saying they don't have budget. And then when it comes here, because the House is one that may also addresses the issue of budget, we can enhance the same so that they are able to work in the manner that they are doing. But I would say in my own assessment, they did their work as appropriate, and in many instances, like the one of Mombasa, they also did. Honorable Speaker, on the issue of compensation, I think it was raised by Honorable Mboko Milemba, that government, and I think also Honorable Russell, that the government said they cannot compensate. Actually, the statement is they have no funds. They have not said in this statement that they cannot compensate, but they are saying there are no funds to compensate. That means there isn't a budget line for compensation, which I think is one of the things that I should also be picking up once we meet with this agency, and especially when we are doing our supplementary budget, now that it has been raised in this House, that they should be able to establish a budget line so that it exists, and then we can see how to handle it when it comes to the House. with the recommendations of the committee. Honorable Speaker, I beg to report that way.
On that segment of statements, there's a request which has been given special consideration by the Honorable, request from the Honorable Emilio Diambo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, and for indulging me. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted, before I make my request, to just indicate that there is erroneous that it is something to do with Muslims. It's, Mr. Speaker, to the bill. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 44, 2C, I rise to request a statement from the chairperson of the Department of National Security regarding a boat tragedy on Lake Victoria that resulted in fatalities on 21st of September 2021, which is yesterday. A boat carrying about 20, estimated 20, though I'm told, Mr. Speaker, there are probably more, passengers departed from the Homa Bay Pier, headed to Nduru area and Sukru Island of Suba North constituency. And on the way, Mr. Speaker, just a few meters from the Homa Bay Pier, the boat capsized, and by the time I was requesting for the statement, 2 people had died. A few hours ago, I'm told they've already recovered 5 bodies, and they were estimating that probably 9 more are still missing, and only 8 had been rescued who were able to swim ashore. Honorable Speaker, it is against this background that I seek a statement from the chairperson, Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security on the following. 1, could the chairperson provide details on the measures the ministry has instituted to effectively and rapidly respond to boat accidents and tragedies such as the one that happened on Lake Victoria, and any plans to undertake recovery? Mr. Speaker, I'm aware, because I have a team at the lake right now, that I'm sure, but those who couldn't swim died as people were actually watching in shock. So, Mr. Speaker, I request that if the chair could hastily do, and even if we don't have a fund, could the government, on a humanitarian basis, consider supporting these families? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You said that the Honorable John Bandi wanted to say something.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, my heart also goes to the families of these people who tragically lost their lives yesterday, and we still continue to get reports of more lives lost, because we really don't know up to now how many lives have been lost. But as Ms. Honorable Millie has said, the numbers keep on changing, because no one has the correct data and statistics of those who actually rode or were taking a ride on the boat. So, Mr. Speaker, what I wanted to ask is this, the committee to consider, and I hope the chair will include this when the report comes back. You can look at the answer and add it onto the issues that Millie had raised. You know, the areas where we have passenger boat transports are designated and they are known. And these are areas where we can have a system where we put people, government officers, to ensure that safety measures are adhered to. And, Mr. Speaker, rescuing someone in the lake, drowning in the lake, is very difficult, because you don't know whether if you attempt to go and rescue that person, you may be the victim. So we need a system where we have patrol boats to help rescue the bodies, the people who who get involved in these kinds of accidents, and ensure that they have the necessary gear, the life jackets, because the main problem, Mr. Speaker, in Lake Victoria is passengers getting into boats without life jackets, even those who have never traveled, who have never taken a ride in the lake. But even, Mr. Speaker, will tell you that even fishermen drown in the lake. The lake has no friend. It can swallow you anytime. And, Mr. Speaker, there are certain areas you may not know are deep. So I would want to get from the committee through the ministry, from the ministry through the committee, the steps that are being taken to ensure that these areas that are designated as the points where the passengers are picked, some safety measures must be put in those areas. But, Mr. Speaker, it is very tragic that we lose people every time and again. Actually, what Honorable Mili didn't hear is I talked about Nyakwara. There is an accident that is still fresh in the minds of our people in Lake Victoria. That was the Nyakwara accident, and it killed so many people. The entire, all the people who were in the boats died. So, Mr. Speaker, it is something that should not be taken lightly. It is killing our people, and our people have no choice because there are no government ferries in Lake Victoria. So our people have no choice. They have to take this dangerous mode of transport, Mr. Speaker. Even me, I took, the first time I took a long ride in a boat was in 1994, and I had no choice. I had to go to where I was going, and there was no any other means of transport. So it is not a choice for our people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, I empathize with my colleague, Honorable Mili, especially on this tragic occasion that has happened, just happened in Lake Victoria. And I promise that what she has sought for, together with additional information which is sought by leader of minority, will be incorporated in the reply, which I'll endeavor to, as soon as possible, present to this House, but in any case, not later than 2 weeks. Thank you.
Very well. Very well. Next order.
Order number 8, motion. Sessional paper number 4 of 2020 on the National Cooperative Policy. Question to be put.
Order, members. Member for Laisamis and a member for Samburu North. Honourable members, debate on this motion was concluded yesterday, and what remained was a question to be put, which I hereby do. This out of the Departmental Committee on
Order members, we are now in the Committee of the Whole House to consider the Irrigation Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2021. Clause 3. Honorable members, I propose a question that Clause 3 be part of the bill. There is no amendment to it. I therefore put the question that Clause 3 be part of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Clause 4. I propose a question that Clause 4 be part of the bill. We have an amendment by the Chair, Environment Committee. Honorable Sophia, for the Chair, right? Yes, please proceed.
And thank you, Chair. We also had an amendment for Clause 2. Okay.
That comes much later.
Okay. Thank you. And Chair, on behalf of the Chair, by inserting the following new paragraphs immediately after the paragraph AA, by deleting the word projects appearing in paragraph G and substituting therefore with the word schemes. This amendment seeks to harmonize the terminology used in the Act with the proposed amendment which refers to schemes and not projects. And Mr. Chair, this amendment is just to clean up.
Okay, that's what, you actually did what I was proposing, because it is already in the order paper.
Yes.
And the members have read it. You can just refer to it and give the import of the amendment, which you have just done. Okay. So that's fine. Honorable members, I propose a question that Clause 4 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. I now put the question that Clause 4 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now put the question that Clause 4, as amended, be part of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye?
Aye.
Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Clause 5. I propose the question that clause 5 be part of the bill, no amendment to it. I therefore put the question that clause 5 be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? All the members?
Yes.
You have to vote. I'll put that again. I now put the question that clause 5 be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Clause 6. I propose the question that clause 6 be part of the bill. We have an amendment by the Honorable Chair. Yes, Honorable Sophia.
And Chair, this amendment is in the order paper, and it means that we propose to reduce the quorum of the conducting business for the board members from 7 to 5. This is proposing increase of the number of board members from 9 to 12, and that is against Mongozo and Code of Conduct. So what we are proposing is that we have membership of the board to be 9, in line with the regulations that is in place, Mr. Chair.
I propose a question that clause 6 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Yes, Honorable Sankok.
The proposals are in line with Mwongozo, and there is no way we can have 12 board members in the process of having an election or voting. In the event that there is a voting, then if you have 12 members, it will be wrong. The Mwongozo Code of Conduct proposed 9, maximum of 11. So Honorable Chair is in line in proposing 9 members and quorum 5. Thank you.
Honorable Kabinga.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'm just wondering why the notes are not in the order paper, online order paper.
What notes, Honorable Kabinga?
The amendments.
They must be in the order. The order paper is not online.
It's not online, unless okay. I'm not able to open it. And this puts us, Honorable Speaker, this is an area I have a lot of interest, and not having the notes puts me in an awkward position.
Okay, you'll get a hard copy, but in the meantime, Senator Tams, please check his machine so that then it is there. I can tell Honorable Mwadi is insisting it is there, but you know, Honorable Mwadi, last time I checked, you are very good at IT, but your neighbor is failing. So, but anyway, before then, let's Honorable Kabinga have a hard copy so that he can.
You know.
Yes, you have seen it in your machine, not in his.
You know, the leader of majority is telling me it's there, and I have opened it and don't have it. It's me who is not having it, not Mwadi.
Yeah, you, Honorable Kabinga, you'll have a hard copy. In the meantime, you'll have your screen sorted. Let's proceed. I propose a question that clause 6 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. I had actually proposed, so I put the question that clause 6 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now put the question that clause 6 as amended be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Clause 7, clause 8, clause 9, clause 10, and clause 11.
I propose a question that clauses 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 be part of the bill. We have no amendments to those clauses. I therefore put the question that clauses 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Clause 12.
I propose the question that clause 12 be amended as be part of the bill. Honorable Chair, you have an amendment?
Yes, Chair. The amendment is just to clean up spelling mistakes, the error. The word mandatory is also amended to seek that the mandatory approval required according to the regulation under the Act. Chair.
Okay, very well. I propose a question that clause 12 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. I put the question that clause 12 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now put the question that clause 12, as amended, be part of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Clauses 13, 14, and 15.
Honorable members, I propose the question that clauses 13, 14, and 15 be part of the bill. We have no amendments to those clauses. I therefore put the question that clauses 13, 14, and 15 be part of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Clause 16.
I propose the question that clause 16 be part of the bill. Honorable Chair, you have an amendment.
And this clause 16 seeks to amend paragraph 2 of the schedules to provide additional ways for members may be removed from the board, Mr. Chair. The members may be removed from the office by the Cabinet Secretary with justification if the member conducts himself in a manner undesirable for a director to carry himself in a way that puts the organization in a bad way. And that the committee notes this provision is ambiguous because it's not giving clear way of removing what is undesirable. So we have, in the order paper, you will see that the person must be within the confines of Chapter 6 and policy, conduct, and regulation that is under the public service, Mr. Speaker. So those are the criteria that is put in place.
Honorable members, I propose the question that clause 16 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. I put the question that clause 16 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now put the question that clause 16 as amended be part of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Clause 2.
I propose the question that clause 2 be part of the bill. Honorable Chair, you have an amendment.
And clause 2 of the bill seeks to incite the new definition of the terms Cabinet Secretary and monitoring and evaluation. In section 2 of the Act, Mr. Chair, if you look at it, gives already those definitions exist in the Act with similar words. Therefore, this proposal is superfluous and hence the amendment is to delete this.
I propose a question that clause 2 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. I put the question that clause 2 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now put the question that clause 2 as amended be part of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Title.
I propose the question that the title be the title of the bill. No amendment to it. I therefore put the question that the title be the title of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Clause 1.
I propose the question that clause 1 be part of the bill. We have no amendment to it. I therefore put the question that clause 1 be part of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable members, we are done with that. The Irrigation Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2021. Mover of the bill.
Yeah, Honorable Chairperson, I beg to move that the committee do report to the House its consideration of the Irrigation Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2021, and its approval thereof with amendments.
Honorable members, I put the question, which is that the committee do report to the House its consideration of the Irrigation Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2021, and its approval thereof with amendments. With as many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. With as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Honorable members, let's proceed. Chairperson. Chairperson looks like it is Honorable Mwadi. Or who is the chairperson? Must be Honorable Mwadi. Mwadi, that was good in the committee of the whole.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to report that the Committee of the Whole House has considered the Irrigation Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2021, and its approval thereof with amendments.
Mover.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the House do agree with the committee in the said report. I also request Honorable Sankok to second the motion for agreement with the report of the Committee of the Whole House.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I do second.
Honorable members, I propose a question, which is that the House do agree with the committee in the said report. Honorable members, I will put a question that the House do agree with the committee in the said report. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Mover, please move for that reading.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the Irrigation Amendment Bill, the National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2021, be now read at that time. Honorable Speaker, as I move this third reading, I want to thank the committee and the House for the expeditious processing of this bill, which, as members will know, is actually a 2021 bill and has actually been processed and completed within this time so that we can sort out the irrigation sector. And particularly, I want to commend the manner in which the Vice Chair of Environment, Sophia Abdi, has really taken us through these amendments this afternoon with clarity, such that members were able to fast track these amendments. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move and request the Honorable Dr. Nyikal to second.
I second.
Members, we shall ped putting the question on that particular matter and until a subsequent time. Well, I thought I had closed that, but anyway, Honorable Kabinga and Honorable Sophia, then we bring a closure to that, then we put the question next time. Honorable Kabinga.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I know I have been overtaken by events, but I need to be on record that I had one or two amendments that I really wanted to bring in. One of them is an important amendment, Honorable Speaker. As you know, through this bill, we did change the name of the National Irrigation Board to National Irrigation Authority. And in line with other authorities, Honorable Speaker, I wanted to bring an amendment so that the head of the authority changes the title from the Chief Executive Officer to Director General in line with other authorities like Kera, Kura, and Kenha, Honorable Speaker. And I really don't know what opportunity I have, and I want to really apologize because this is something I really wanted to do, Honorable Speaker. I also wanted to look at the period of the head of that institution, Honorable Speaker, in line with other institutions. The term of office, Honorable Speaker, in other authorities is 5 years, and the current term is 3 years, Honorable Speaker. Two very important points that I needed to bring in in form of amendments. And that's why this afternoon, Honorable Speaker, I think I was caught by surprise because the whole week I've had so many matters within my committee that made me to lose track of this particular bill, Honorable Speaker. If there can be a recommittal, I would be so happy, Honorable Speaker, so that I can bring in these two very important amendments. And I think the committee is also in support of those particular amendments. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Unfortunately, Honorable Kabinga, there can be no recommittal. That window is closed. But nothing stops you from bringing an amendment in future as a bill in itself. So the window is closed in terms of recommittal now, but the future isn't closed for you. Honorable Sophia.
Mr. Speaker, I totally agree with this amendment, and I think at a later stage, because it has been overtaken by time, and at a later stage, because already if you go to the authority, you'll find the CEO is called CEO, and the deputy is called Deputy Director General. So we have that kind of, so even us as a committee, it has taken me by surprise not to find that in our amendments. So, Mr. Chair, on behalf of the committee, I want really to thank the committee members who have taken a lot of time to look at this bill. We have even gone to the field to check on irrigations and how they look like so that we give new life to irrigation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will also want to thank the leadership of this House for looking at this and giving us the opportunity to finish it as quickly as possible, Mr. Speaker. And finally, I want to thank the members of this House for the support they have given us as a committee. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
I had said the window is closed on that. We shall peg putting the question on that particular one, that item, to a subsequent time. Next order.
Order number 10, the Social Assistance Repeal Bill, National Assembly Bill number 16 of 2020. Resumption of debate.
Honorable members, this is a resumption of debate really, that was interrupted on Tuesday, September 21st, 2021. So we are just resuming that. There was, I think it had been moved, not I think, but certainly it had been moved and seconded, and proposed, right? Other members, just for avoidance of doubt, let me propose a question. It had been moved yesterday and seconded. Just for record, let me propose a question that the Social Assistance Repeal Bill, National Assembly Bill number 16 of 2020 be now read a second time. We shall start to my left, Honorable Oduor Obaka, member for CIR.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Although this is not what I wanted to contribute to, but it's important to say something. Sorry, let me just take my time a little. I wasn't paying attention.
Honorable Odiabo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, because we have been consulting, I'm presuming this is a social assistance. Thank you.
Indeed, it is a social assistance repeal bill.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm very reluctant to support the repeal of this bill. Mr. Speaker, the reason why I am reluctant, and I've told the majority leader, who has actually tried to persuade me otherwise, so I might actually consider supporting him reluctantly. But the reason why I'm not very eager to support the repeal is that this act has itself never been operationalized. Mr. Speaker, I know the majority leader has indicated that there is a technical legal issue that why that hasn't been done. And I think there is the better way to go around it would then to bring an amendment to the PFM Act so that we actually actualize this act, because the idea behind the Social Assistance Act is very noble, to assist those of us who are in very difficult circumstances and those who are vulnerable, of course, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, what's happening, Mr. Speaker, is that this bill was brought by Honorable the late Her Excellency Governor Joyce Laboso, and we worked very, very closely with the Honorable Laboso on this issue, based especially on work that we have done in the civil society and the suffering that we saw a lot of people going through. But Mr. Speaker, I am just worried that we are, and so what I would have encouraged the majority leader that what he should have done is to bring the proposed amendment to the PFM Act at the same time as we are repealing this one. But instead of repealing an act, when we do not have another one at hand, Mr. Speaker, my only worry would be that perhaps the more hidden reason behind the repeal is because we have persons who are benefiting from these monies who do not want a regulatory framework. The kind that are sending monies to unknown people like...
Because I am a member of the Labor and Social Welfare Committee. I'm also a person with disability. I'm also a member of parliament representing 6.5 million Kenyans with disability in this house who benefit directly from this social assistance fund. Honorable Speaker, I'd like to thank our chairman, Honorable Kabinga Wadhayo. Wadhayo, Honorable Speaker, means a peaceful person. He's a peaceful person who needed to assist persons who are vulnerable in our society, and that is why he was really very passionate about repealing this one, this Social Assistance Act, so that we can have a fund that is properly managed and a fund that is not done as if it is charity, a fund that is not under the management of a department in the ministry, a fund that depends on the exchequer, which time they think they will release the fund and which time they will not release the fund. Honorable Speaker, I know you are a leader. You represent a constituency on top of being a leader, a speaker here. And when you represent a constituency, I'm sure every early in the morning or even in the evening in barazas, you have found vulnerable people, either older persons, persons with severe disability, orphans and vulnerable children, coming to you and telling you that they have not received their stipend this month. They have not received for 3-4 months. Honorable Speaker, if you follow to it, you may find that it was because the exchequer did not release this fund or some level of mismanagement, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, 30 billion is not chicken change. It's a lot of money that need a board and proper management. If we can have a state corporation like anti-FGM state corporation, only receiving 200 million from exchequer, how can we not have a management authority or board or state corporation managing 30 billion Kenya shillings? Honorable Speaker, this fund is so important because it assists the vulnerable members of our society. The older persons, for instance, our community ties, our cultural ties have been severed by civilization, have been severed by westernization. Most of our people now live in urban centers and they have left our older persons back in rural areas suffering. Honorable Speaker, some of them are sickly. They go without food, they go without drugs. Honorable Speaker, this bill is very, very important. Honorable Speaker, this bill was brought by the late Honorable Joyce Laboso. May her soul rest in eternal peace. She considered the vulnerable members of our society because all of us can never be equal. Honorable Speaker, and at that time, I was in the National Council for Persons with Disability. When the request for us to be able to say who will benefit from this fund was brought to the National Council for Persons with Disability, we said it is not all persons with disability because we don't want persons with disability to be supplicants seeking favors. We need opportunities, not sympathy. We said The other categories of persons with disability whom we can empower, whom we can educate, can benefit from. Somebody with cerebral palsy. Honorable Speaker.
What is out of order, Honorable Otiende? Amolo.
Mr. Speaker, I respect the Honorable Sankok. And he's started by saying that he's supporting the bill as presented. And yet everything he has said so far seems to be opposing the idea of repealing the act. So, Mr. Speaker, we need clarity. Can the Honorable Sankok make up his mind whether he's supporting or opposing?
Maybe Honorable Sankok is taking a longer route. Honorable Otiende Omolo is very keen on your conclusion.
Honorable Speaker, you know, Honorable Omolo Otiende is a renowned lawyer, learned friend, and very intelligent. He was, I think, the chair of Ombudsman, if I'm not wrong, and he understands our constitution very well. But sometimes when we take him through the longer route, he disappears somewhere in the bush. But I'll bring you to speed that I do support this amendment, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I'm just enriching the bill and even the amendment, Honorable Speaker, so that when we have...
But it is a repeal. Honorable Sankok, it will no longer be there tomorrow.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Emilio Odhiambo is always on a point of order.
Order, Honorable Sankok. Honorable Sankok, there is a point of order from Honorable Akob.
Mr. Speaker, I know that sometimes as members of parliament, we are so busy that sometimes we don't actually understand sometimes the essence of what we are doing. And it is not wrong to acknowledge. When the bill is said to be repealed, it means that bill dies. And I'm hearing Honorable Sankok saying that he's supporting amendment. There is no amendment. The bill is going in total. There is no other legal framework now. And that is why you hear me saying that I'm very reluctant to support, because the leader of majority said they will bring later. There is nothing. So if you are talking about supporting people with a disability, there is really nothing after this. So really, the point of order is just that Honorable Sankok is not in order by referring to that is enriching what is dead. You can't enrich a dead thing. It is dead. If you say you are supporting, then you are saying, let the bill die completely. I'm not adding a hand, a leg, or an arm to it. It is dead like a dodo.
Very well,
but if you are not supporting, then it means you are telling him, amend it because there is this part which is defective or not defective.
Well,
thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very good information. Actually, not a point of order, but information through some route to Honorable Sankok. Actually, this is a repeal of the law. But I'm sure, Honorable Sankok, your thoughts are now packaged in a manner that speaks to what you're dealing with. Honorable Sankok.
Honorable Speaker, this is a bill that we are seeking to repeal. And Honorable Emilio Odhiambo, I know and I understand what is happening here. And when we are repealing a bill, it does not mean that the social assistance fund have disappeared. It means that the social assistance fund is still there, and it will still assist the vulnerable persons with persons in our society. And what I just wanted to pass a message to the ministry responsible, that severely disabled persons are persons we cannot economically empower. They are persons who did not have any opportunity to better their lives, unlike older persons who at one time they were strong enough to better their life. It beat all logics to have close to 1 million older persons in the register and only 42,000 persons with severe disability in the register. It should have been the other way around, because the most vulnerable members of our society are actually persons with severe disability.
And in 2013, 9 years ago, it exercised its wisdom and it took the taxpayers' time to enact a very elaborate scheme under the Act.
It cannot be that now we suddenly say that all that effort and all those years were in vain. In fact, all the issues that the Honorable Sankok has spoken to are already in the Act. The Act establishes an authority with perpetual succession, which can be sued in its name or otherwise. It establishes a board. It is so elaborate that I have no idea what else is it that it would require that any member would think for. Mr. Speaker, this Act goes and covers so much that we usually struggle with. You find in Section 20, for example, it covers orphans and vulnerable persons. Section 21, the older persons who are even defined. Section 22, the unemployed. Section 23, which would have concerned the Honorable Sankok, persons living with disability, and it goes on and on. And what the Act tries to do, in my understanding, is to centralize this idea of social assistance. We are a country that tries to experiment with social welfare, but we do not always do it properly. So it's haphazard. One time you find there's a ministry for youth that is giving out handouts. Another time you find there's a ministry giving out persons with disabilities. Another one, older persons. But it is not synchronized. It is my understanding that as we were trying to move towards a welfare state, we were then trying to synchronize all these things so that we minimize pilferage, so that we ensure that only people who are entitled to social assistance get social assistance, and so that we are also sure that we can manage the social assistance that we offer to give, because you can only give what you have. Now, in all this, Mr. Speaker, I am not sure I'm persuaded or have been made to fully understand why this elaborate scheme that we sought to implement 9 years ago has not been implemented, and instead of moving towards implementation, we are moving towards abolition. Because, the Honorable Sankok, once you repeal, there's nothing to talk about. It is dead like a dodo. If you want to start anything else, you will start from scratch. In my understanding, if you enact legislation that is imperfect, you do not repeal it. You amend it and improve it. And if there are issues of regulation, even if there are regulations that can come under the PFM Act, Mr. Speaker, can the members who choose not to pay attention give us time?
Order members, that member, please consult at a lower tone so that then we are able to hear what Honorable Tiende is saying.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your protection. So, Mr. Speaker, it's my understanding, and I do not doubt that there might be imperfections, but those imperfections should not lead. Mr. Speaker, this disruption and consultation sometimes have a very thin line. So, Mr. Speaker, it's my understanding, and I would be quite willing to entertain and understand and even support any amendments that will make this work. But, Mr. Speaker, to repeal it is to take us back a decade. And, Mr. Speaker, remember, these are not idle expectations. Our Constitution contemplates this kind of social assistance when it comes to social and economic rights. And, Mr. Speaker, therefore, to suggest that because the Act does not tally well with the PFM Act or with the regulations that have been made or not made thereunder is one that does not augur well for me. Because in my opinion, if there's any issue to be dealt with, let it be dealt with either in this Act or in the regulations. But if there are adjustments to be made, we cannot kill a good legal policy because of administrative shortcomings. Mr. Speaker, I oppose.
Honorable Ali Haji.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I wish to support this repeal of this bill. And one of the reasons why I support is the fact that, and I wish to refer the House to the committee's report, and more specifically on the observation of the committee, which says that the existing Act does not provide for the national social assistance
Assistance Fund to receive funding from the Exchequer. And sometimes we pass laws in this House with gaps. And I'm afraid they just concluded a bill on National Irrigation Agency was also one of them. So it is important that we repeal with a view to coming up with a better law that now accommodates all this. And in particular, that in the first place, it was hoped that this act, the ministry would introduce a more comprehensive law in its place addressing all broader sector issues, which it didn't. And I want to also support the fact that once we begin to redo this bill afresh, then areas like Mandera South, we can be able to consider all those members who are vulnerable. The issue of this area sometimes regarded as far-flung, that certain services do not reach. It is therefore very important that we restart the whole process and accommodate and sort of involve the communities that hitherto are always forgotten. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Nyikal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand here to actually oppose this bill. I was involved in actually the bill, the bill and then the act that is now being repealed. And as far as I can see, even looking at the committee report, the only issue is that this authority is going to handle the funds that are currently now being handled with the ministry. That is the only thing. There are statements in that it is not in line with the PFM Act. But I know very many other funds that have also been started, and you have the PFM Act, where those funds also not declared unimplementable. The other thing is that it says that it is not in line with the policy on social assistance. Now, and actually they went to court, and what the court said, the ministry went to court, and what the court said was that there is need to look at time and give the ministry time so that the policy is aligned with the law. I don't think you work backwards, that you repeal a law because it's not in line with the policy, which you haven't even put in place properly. That's what the court said, that is given time. What the court provided for is time to look at the policy and therefore allowed for the delay in implementation of the act. So, the Speaker, the only other thing again I can see that would have been cured by just an amendment, I've looked at briefly the act, is basically this would then be an authority that would probably be under the Ministry of Labor and Social Development. So I do not see, I think there's enough room for amendments in this act to make it operational. Mr. Speaker, a lot of funds are actually being used in this social assistance. And I know the history of social assistance. The orphans and vulnerable children, the persons with disability, the elderly persons, all these are the people that actually are supposed to be, and they are very clearly defined in this act. So I don't understand why we will remove an act and therefore replace it with regulation. And then say at the same statement that we are putting it under regulations, but we are coming up with an act. What would have happened is that they would have come straight with an act that would either amend this, or if they're repealing, we would see that most of the components of what is in this act is actually in the new act. But they're not coming with an amendment or a new act that will dictate that we repeal this act. We are basically repealing this act and replacing it with regulations. What I don't understand now, because I know how the ministry works. If this now is being under regulations from the Treasury, and the funds themselves are being managed by in a ministry, what is going to be the relationship there? And even now, as we are, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of problems in the management of these funds. I know when we started it, it was a smaller program. We had actually have an interministerial committee that was to look at all this. And even when this bill came into place, I think there was consultations around how this would then work and put all these things together. And the social assistance program is intended to be larger. Even it was meant to later on to extend to take care of vulnerable people who live in poor urban areas, like Korokocho, Kibera, and actually, a bit of it was started in Mombasa, and it was supposed to be extended. So to just repeal this act, replace it with regulations, without a substantive amendment bill, I think it's not in order. What I think should happen is that they should quickly come with another act, another bill that is more substantive, that takes into consideration all the contents of this act, and then say, with this, the other act stands repealed. So in my view, I think it is not proper that we should this, and therefore I oppose.
Honorable Ochieng, member for Migori.
For giving me this opportunity. I think the whole issue about this repeal could have not been put better than just the last speaker, Dr. Nikal, and Honorable Tiende Molo here have done it. Mr. Speaker, I oppose this repeal, and more so with nothing replacing it immediately. Mr. Speaker, the only thing that I want to add to everything that Honorable Tiende said and that of Dr. Nikal is that I am a member operating with a fund which is managed through those regulations. And I think all the women reps in this house will agree with me that we have had enough problems in the management of GAF. And therefore, when we are just talking about some regulation which is not elaborate enough and is going to still be under the Ministry of Treasury, and that is all we are banking on, Mr. Speaker, this is not going to help this country. The proponents of the repeal are saying that this money is lying idle. Mr. Speaker, I think we are all witnesses in this country that this money has done a lot. I am a witness that even just recently, during the COVID pandemic, I am aware that almost all the persons with disability in Migori County who had not been registered with or the National Council of Persons with Disability received money, cash transfers from the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare, and all the other persons with disabilities in this country did the same for the first 3 or so months that the pandemic was here with us. In Migori again last year and the year before, we suffered serious damages from floods. This money came handy, and people were rescued, people were given food, and they lived until the floods subsided. So what I think I'm saying is that we have seen this money being put to use. And the bill that was introduced by the late Dr. Laboso was simply meant to introduce some control over the use of this money. And sometimes we know governments don't like to be controlled. I think what the majority leader should do is to come up with an amendment or some compelling act
that must make that other bill operational, not just repealing it, because after all, it has not been made operational as Honorable Sonko would like to convince the House. Mr. Speaker, I think social assistance is necessary in this country. We are witnessing the number of jobless youths in this country. They are young people, but they may need a lot of social assistance. In other countries, they have very elaborate social assistance, especially for the senior citizens and the elderly. Much as this is not very well done in Kenya, I would wish that the ministry actually does it to the latter, so that our elderly people can also feel like they are people who can buy their own soap, buy their own sugar. I think this is the bit that this House needs to address. Mr. Speaker, the number of orphans in this country has increased like never before. We have had pandemics, like even the recent COVID, and HIV/AIDS has been claiming lives of young parents in this country. And so we need these orphans to be helped. Mr. Speaker, widows, some of the young girls in my own county, you know, I'm a pastor, Mr. Speaker, and sometimes when women lose their husbands, pastors would come there and say, you can see Jesus. I don't know how to tell these young women to see Jesus, because they will only see Jesus when that Jesus appears with bread, school fees, a roof over them, and something like that. So the need for social assistance in this country is overwhelming, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I believe we cannot just repeal this bill the way I heard one of the speakers saying that there is some irrigation to be done in the northeastern. I don't understand how this money can be connected to irrigation. There is enough money that we are giving to the Ministry of Agriculture. Even the other day, we were talking about increasing funding for the irrigation board. So let us put everything into the right perspective. What this House should do, Mr. Speaker, is my prayer that if there are any gaps that are making this money not to operate the way it is supposed to operate, this is the bit that we should do. But I think the need for social assistance for those categories of people that I have just mentioned, Mr. Speaker, is glaring. And if we think the ministry is not using it, I think we should summon that minister and ask them, the CS, the PS, and all the directors, why is this money not working the way it ought to work? Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I stand here to oppose that repeal. Thank you.
Honorable Ibrahim Sahal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, the new regulation aims to streamline the cash transfer program with the funds administered by the Oversight Board through Social Assistance Fund. The objectives and the purpose of the fund is to provide funding for the provision of social assistance for the poor and vulnerable persons, and in particular, among others, to provide for development and promotion of social assistance programs and initiatives in the country, to provide for the criteria for identification, screening, and prioritization of beneficiaries of social assistance benefits, to provide for quality assurance framework to ensure that only eligible persons benefits from the social assistance funds, to develop and promote programs to render the recipients of social assistance capable of self-support and exit from social assistance benefits, to enhance financial capacity of the recipient and their dependent from linkage with other government interventions, to promote and incorporate of recipient into other complementary services and access to better life conditions. I support.
Honorable Didi Nyoro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I rise to oppose because, Mr. Speaker, even as I go forward, it is good for us to know that safety nets and having any form of cash transfer is actually a branch that shows that there is inequality in an economy. In every economy that, Mr. Speaker, that we need to support the lowest and underprivileged, it shows and it is a manifestation that they are not active participants in the economy. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, even as we debate about the cash transfers, and even as we discuss about a security net for those at the lower cadre in our economic society, it is good for us to understand that for an economy to thrive, the economy has to be equal. And for an economy to thrive, we need to involve everyone to be an active participant in the growth and productivity of that economy. And Mr. Speaker, maybe that goes into explaining the reason why in our country at the current moment that we have a lot of need to support people, Mr. Speaker, and especially those who are in the lower cadre. In many forms, Mr. Speaker, even the bursary that we give is a form of security net. Even the kind of cash transfer that we give to the elderly, the over 70, Mr. Speaker, it goes to explain the same. Mr. Speaker, for an economy to thrive properly, all these people that we currently support need to be people that can fend for themselves. And the best way to do this, Mr. Speaker, is for us as leaders, and especially the executive, to have policies that, Mr. Speaker, give them the opportunity to be productive agents within our economy, Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, I say so because if you compare the current regime led by President Uhuru Kenyatta, and if you compare the same to the regime of President Kibaki, most of us went, for example, to university during the time of President Kibaki. We actually went through without the need of bursaries. Not that we come from wealthy families. Like myself, my father was just a carpenter, and my mother a peasant farmer. But because the economy was productive, and Mr. Speaker, there was money to be made in the economy, most of us, Mr. Speaker, just thrived within the same. Even if through hardships, we made it. But in the current administration, in the current times, Mr. Speaker, those at the lower strata in our society will need direct support from the government because there are very few avenues and there are very few opportunities for them to make a living and even to make extra to support their children in school and also to live a better life. And Mr. Speaker, if you look at the current global trades, 1% of the wealthiest in the world have twice as wealth of 6.9 billion people in the country. Mr. Speaker, the billionaires of the world, those who have the status to be called billionaires, meaning they have net worth of more than $1 billion US. Mr. Speaker, those ones combined have as much wealth as 4.6 billion citizens of this world. Mr. Speaker, that goes to explain the kind of inequality that you are faced with in this kind of era, Mr. Speaker. And the data I'm giving is from Oxfam, Mr. Speaker, credible data. Mr. Speaker, even as we make wealth and announce GDP growth every now and then, GDP cannot be eaten. And you cannot pay school fees using GDP. You use the money in the pocket. And Mr. Speaker, that is why even in economics, there is something we call Gini coefficient. Yes, every now and then we get the Treasury and the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics claiming that our GDP is growing. But Mr. Speaker, we don't go further to question, even after the growth of the economy, who are these people who are the beneficiaries of this created wealth? Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the Gini coefficient of our country that measures the inequality between the rich and the poor in our country is just around 4.6. 1 meaning extreme inequality, and 0, of course, depicts a rather unequal society, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the other very unequal societies in the world, actually number 1 is South Africa. And the reason why we see the kind of chaos we see quite often in South Africa, Mr. Speaker, is bred by the gap between those who have and those who don't. And Mr. Speaker, if we don't mind as leaders, and especially those in the executive, to draft policies that distribute the growth of our economy to as many people as possible, Mr. Speaker, will be breeding chaos also in our country. It is bedeviling, Mr. Speaker, to know that the kind of wealth that we are creating in this country, every Kenyan knows. Out of the 47 million Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, when we read GDP growths, and when we say that the economy is growing, unfortunately, the majority of the millions of Kenyans still wallow in poverty, Mr. Speaker, even as the created wealth is concentrated to just not more than 10 families. Mr. Speaker, and of course, having the super like 4 families taking over every single wealth that is created in our economy. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we continue to have an economy where a majority are wallowing in poverty, while the little that is created by the technology and any other form of production in our country is concentrated to a few. And that is why many of the Kenyan people just remain as voting robots to keep on voting the same few families that keep on using the same power that we give them to dominate us even further, Mr. Speaker, to perpetuity. Mr. Speaker, we need to address this matter because inequality across is not a very good thing to be encouraged. Mr. Speaker, I say so because if you are to run even from a country like China, and I think I've said that before even in this house, when Deng Xiaoping took over in 1978, most of the Chinese people were actually in dire poverty, in extreme poverty. And just using economics apparatus and using the right policies, Mr. Speaker, he made the Chinese country and the Chinese economy depart from the very retrogressive policies of Mao Zedong, economic policies, like proletarian revolution and the cultural revolution, Mr. Speaker, that had led prior to that to many deaths through famine, Mr. Speaker. And when he came over in 1978, he crafted policies that encouraged a lot of production within the Chinese economy. Fortunately, this was well distributed, Mr. Speaker, because when we build an economy where people can thrive in production, and especially that is based on manufacturing, most of this kind of production, Mr. Speaker, are labor intensive. And when they are labor intensive, what that means is that the fight now between the profit and wages, Mr. Speaker, brings about stabilization of equality. Because when we have people who are working, and especially when you are given an opportunity to unionize, they are able to negotiate for better wages. And better wages, Mr. Speaker, simply means that we distribute money from the profit that benefits a few shareholders to wages that benefits many. I'm still in the Chinese case, Mr. Speaker. By using policies that could spur production based on manufacturing, many of the Chinese people, and to be precise, Deng Xiaoping pulled over 700 million Chinese from poverty, Mr. Speaker, in his term up to 1990. And the basis of the Chinese growth in the economy, Mr. Speaker, is the reign of Deng Xiaoping from 1978. Mr. Speaker, we can learn even the same from South Korea. South Korea was still poor. Actually, at the time of independence, our country, Kenya, actually was richer in terms of GDP per capita than South Korea. The same policies were used, Mr. Speaker, because when we people become active participants in the economy, and therefore they may not actually need bursary. They may actually far because they can literally earn that money through their hard work and through their labor, Mr. Speaker. Having said so, Mr. Speaker, I think it is good for us to have a standalone organization that deals with this, and I think, Mr. Speaker, it will not be good for us to overburden the ministry because we need a standalone body, Mr. Speaker, to be able to handle, and therefore, I oppose the repeal of the Act, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Honorable Amin Kasim, member for Wajir East.
Honorable Speaker, I wish to give my input into this repeal from the onset opposing the repeal of this Social Protection Act. Honorable Speaker, Kenya is an economy that has a lot of disparity in terms of the social and the economic development of this country. Kenya, we have realized nearly 70% of the Kenyans are living and dwelling in poverty. Honorable Speaker, it is enshrined in this Constitution 2010. Article 43 allows every Kenyan to have an access to food security, to basic rights, social protection. It's already enshrined in the Constitution. And this Constitution emphasizes in such a way that all Kenyans can be able to provide and access basic rights, basic human rights. And the fact that this act was there to provide and allows every Kenyan to access those things, then repealing it makes it us to refer back. Honorable Speaker, most of those projects which are still anchored in the Ministry of Treasury gives a lot of disparity in terms of its distribution. You will be finding that if funds are still being held at the Treasury, then it is the whims of that ministry to provide whom they so wish. But the fact that we have an entity that is able to provide for the same and distribute to all the needy persons and be able to provide for health services, for food security, school feeding programs, all those social networks that are desired, then I find it's a retrogressive, and repealing this act, I find it as a very retrogressive, because we have already made gains, and these gains are going to be referred by repealing it and trying to domicile these funds in the Treasury. The fact that it's going to be within Treasury, it is negating the gains we have already did and we have made for Kenyans. Honorable Speaker, this fund, for the first time, for the last 2 years that it has been working, it was able to provide for vulnerable groups, those who have lost their livelihoods. They have lost their livelihood, either basically to drought or basically to lack of employment or as a result of abject poverty which they have had over the years. So, and even those families that are widowed, it's able to provide for social network. The fact that this money, which was initially meant for social protection of those vulnerable groups, and then taking it back in terms of even targeting, it's properly targeted when it is within an institution, within an entity, within the ministry, an act on its own. Honorable Speaker, taking it back again to the Ministry of Treasury, then I find it an absurd, and we cannot be able to agree onto those things. Honorable Speaker, one observation we have done, and even early years of independence, we have had a country of 10 millionaires and 10 million beggars. Today, we still have a country where we have 40 million beggars, and people are still living in abject poverty. The economy has not been able to thrive, and as a result of poor governance we have observed over the years have been responsible for those abject poverty and the fact that many Kenyans cannot be able to access basic rights like food. And even then, His Excellency Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta has even anchored certain pillars like food security, health, housing, and as a result of even this, what we have observed, those perspectives that we have been observing for has been reversed. Today, we do not know where we have left those visions that we have had for Kenyans. The fact that, again, that this program was envisaged for those to support those needy groups and then take it back again to Treasury, we will not be able to achieve. Honorable Speaker, the domicile, for those who are emphasizing to repeal this act, are making us go back. They are making us not to achieve the basic human rights which is enshrined in the Constitution. And Honorable Speaker, I truly oppose these thinkers who think and they want to bring us back to those dark days when we don't need to consider and support our needy persons in our society. Honorable Speaker, culturally we have a social network system which existed over the years. Urbanization, education has affected, and the social network that existed within the communities have been overridden by civilization. Honorable Speaker, the fact that the government has already taken responsibility of providing for these needy persons, providing social network system, providing for food, providing for school feeding programs, providing for even the needy and the orphans and the disadvantaged family members, we find that was an obligation which was earlier emphasized in this act. But today, again, we reverse those gains which we have done, then I consider it as an absurd and retrogressive, and we do not need to uphold and agree as members of parliament anything that is retrogressive, something that is going to take us back. Honorable Speaker, I oppose, and I oppose totally the repealing of this Social Protection Act. Thank you very much.
Honorable Abdi Yusuf, member for Kamkoji.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this particular bill, and I stand to oppose it. I think that if you look at the genesis of the social assistance bill, which has been repealed by this particular bill of 2020. First of all, it was enacted to implement Article 43, 1E of the Constitution, which guarantees the right to social security as one of the economic and social rights. So I do agree with some of the other speakers that this is a backward step. It actually removes an important step that we had made in implementing some of the rights in our Constitution, of which this Social Assistance Act number 24 of 2013 had provided. If we look at what it provides, the Act provides for rendering of social assistance to vulnerable persons and establishes the National Social Assistance Authority to identify and provide social assistance to persons in need. And if you look at the composition of our country, this is a country with one of the biggest disparities between the rich and the poor. And therefore, unlike some of the wealthy countries or middle-income countries that are able to provide for their citizens, we have a huge number of people who have no social network, no protection whatsoever, not provided for any assistance under a very difficult social economic system. And in recent years, if you look at the economic downturn, the serious effects of the pandemic, COVID, you would notice that, in fact, even large numbers of people are moving from the middle classes into the lower levels of poverty. And that's why we need to protect the social guarantees that exist as is provided by the Social Security Act. The other important element is that what we need, if there is a need to improve the Social Security Act of 2013, what we need to do is to amend it and to provide and strengthen it through some of the positive elements that I see in this Repeal Act of 2020. But it really doesn't need to be thrown away altogether. And that's why we really need to reconsider, given our economic circumstances, given the large number of people who are in need of support. If you look at Nairobi, which is the capital city, even you don't have to look at our rural poor, is that we have large numbers of very poor people. 60% of our population in Nairobi lives in informal settlements under conditions that would be considered to be below the minimum poverty standards of the United Nations. In those neighborhoods, there is no affordable housing, there is no guarantee for jobs, they don't enjoy any of the social services that are guaranteed in many countries of the world. And then we have a very large number of elderly, disabled people who are left on their own. In some rural areas, maybe there is a support system because of the family structures that exist in place. But in this particular case, in cities like Kenya, in Nairobi, the cities like Nairobi and Nakuru and Mombasa, many of the elderly, many of the disabled people, many of the orphans are left on their own. They fit into the descriptions many years ago that our country was given, that Kenya was more a country of man-eat, man society, in which these people were left out. What the Social Security Act of 2013 did was to provide protection to some sections of that particular desperate population. And now to come around and to repel the benefits of that act, I must say, and move it to a ministry instead of an independent authority, is definitely going to undermine the intentions of the original bill and also the constitutional article that it supports. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, what I would like to suggest is that we should look at some of the loopholes that exist in the Social Security Act and maybe bring it back with amendments. But I completely oppose the idea of repealing the entire act on its whole. This is not the right thing to do it. To move it into a ministry's authority is not the right thing to do it. I think the Kenyan public would be better served if this act was administered as it is at the moment under an authority other than the ministry. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I oppose the Repeal Act Bill of 2020. Thank you so much.
Let's have Honorable Chieng, then Majority Leader.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, having gone through the Social Assistance Act of 2013, having listened to fellow members contribute on this bill, I'm tempted to request the Majority Leader who is going to speak after me to consider withdrawing this bill instead of, trying to tell us to go along this. Because, Mr. Speaker, where he sits, he will tell you that in law-making processes, we don't move downwards. I've never heard a law being downgraded into a regulation. Mr. Speaker, most of the time, we move regulations into a law. We move a gazette notice into a law. But we hardly ever. Mr. Speaker, I've read the memorandum of this bill. Mr. Speaker, nowhere in this memorandum are we told why we want to add more functions to the Ministry of Finance. It is already so bethammed with so much work to do. But, Mr. Speaker, it belies this government's approach, this government's shabby treatment of people who are poor. Mr. Speaker, I'll give you an example before I go into the main bill. I'll give you an example. That every year, Mr. Speaker, we talk about hunger. 2 weeks ago, the president declared drought and national disaster in the country. We've been haggling about maize and sugar. Mr. Speaker, would you know that our strategic grain reserves is established under regulations, while the rest of the world, this is established by law? Reason? People want room for corruption. Like in this case, Mr. Speaker, we're talking about no less than 26 billion shillings a year. Mr. Speaker, without any explanation, I'm tempted to think that this is another conduit by the bureaucrats at the Ministry of Finance to get a way of, they're saying, this is so much money going. How can we control it? It isn't about service delivery. It isn't about making it effective. It isn't about making more people to get the money. No. It's about creating more bureaucracy to make the disbursement of these funds more difficult. Mr. Speaker, the social... Mr. Speaker, you need to protect me because their language is... What they are talking about is trying to distract me, Mr. Speaker, if you allow me.
Is that Honorable Akoda and Honorable Wanga? Please consult at a lower tone so that then we get to hear what Honorable Cheng is
Mr. Speaker, social assistance, social protection is not just about disbursing money. It includes building communities. It includes offering psychological support. It includes building families. It includes things that would create cohesion in the nation. Making it a mechanical job of taking money, handing over to people, Mr. Speaker, is a misunderstanding of what social protection looks like. Mr. Speaker, our law recognizes, the Constitution of Kenya recognizes that Kenyans have the right to social, economic, and civil rights, and including cultural rights, Mr. Speaker. And so, to effectuate social security rights, Mr. Speaker, we have the NSSF Act. To effectuate the right to health, Mr. Speaker, this afternoon, and even what has been existing, is a health care provision framework. So the social assistance law was made to also ensure that we have a framework that is broad enough, that takes into account all the needs and all the requirements for facilitation of the assistance of those who may need it. We're talking about orphans. We're talking about jobless people. We're talking about the elderly. We're talking about the sick, Mr. Speaker. I don't, in my mind, believe that the Ministry of Finance in this country have the capacity to set up the framework and the infrastructure required for this kind of a job. This is a job for the Ministry of Labor and the Social Assistance Protection Authority, which the government has deliberately refused to operationalize for obvious reasons, Mr. Speaker. That every time we see any big money, Mr. Speaker, we think only part of the government should control. That's why you see sometimes they take 3-5 ministries put together, they take 3-4 personnel put together. Even in the middle of a government, you see the president transferring this personnel into this ministry because it's deemed as more lucrative. It's a wrong way of going about things, Mr. Speaker. If we believe that the reason we want to assist, the reason this act was made was to assist those who are vulnerable, those who are not in a position to afford food, those who can't afford health care, those who can't afford medical services, those who are indigent, Mr. Speaker, then what I would imagine the majority would be doing today is to bring a law or push for the implementation of this act as is. But to bring a one-line amendment that will require that a law passed by this House is repealed so that you give powers to a minister, Mr. Speaker, is, in my opinion, a misunderstanding even on the side of those who propose this law. As we speak to him, Mr. Speaker, we have so many MPs that are here to tell you that in every 10 messages you receive, Mr. Speaker, 5 are about death, 2 are about the sick person, 1 is about school fees. It's all these things, Mr. Speaker. Why would someone want to centralize this in one ministry? I don't understand it. In fact, if you ask Mr. Speaker, I would have proposed that this is a role that we push to be shared by the county governments. Because county governments now have roles that are predominantly social. I would imagine that they would have been talking about having county governments helping national government on issues of healthcare, issues of agriculture, as has been put in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just don't know what to say, but sometimes what comes to this House, Mr. Speaker, just surprises you. And that's why yesterday you had members here talking about the VAT. It was brought before this House. We passed it. Then you hear another member of Parliament talking somewhere in a funeral that the fuel prices are very high. Yet they are brought here. When we make our comments and we tell government who brings these bills through the majority leader that this is wrong, they still ram it through us. This country belongs to all of us, Mr. Speaker. This idea that only some people can manage resources, that only a group of communities can manage, Mr. Speaker, is wrong. We need to start building structures and institutions. We need to start trusting each other. We need to work for all of us. It can't be that every time there is something that has big money, oh, this one should not be given to this ministry. It's wrong. So I would imagine that what we want to do as Parliament is to try to get more money into this kitty. Get more money into this kitty, push for the implementation of the authority, make it more strong, so that Mbokimunya here and all these people of Kikipiri are able, you don't have to ask questions about those who are Zes and mamas who don't have money. But to come waste Parliament's time, Mr. Speaker, I'm so surprised. Because since 2013, Mr. Speaker, on this floor, we've had the Social Protection Council bill, we've had the PFMA bill, proposing the same thing. We've had the social assistance bill being proposed. Mr. Speaker, what we should be talking about today would be how do we promote equity? How do we ensure that we reach more people? How do we ensure that this act is acting well from the constituency level, not at the national level? How do we give MPs a bigger role? Because most of those requests come to MPs. How do we strengthen those vetting committees on the ground? I've never had something as good as this, that you don't want to give it one individual to be the one making decisions. Mr. Speaker, I oppose with all the breath that I have. Thank you.
Honorable members, I had called the mover, who is a majority leader, to reply, but I can tell Honorable John Buddy has come running literally. You want to?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr.
Speaker, thank
then
you.
we'll have the majority replying.
For that indulgence, although the majority leader is asking me to contribute to the next, but Mr. Speaker, I really don't know why the majority leader could bring this bill to the House of repealing an act of parliament without a replacement. It's a very rare kind of legislative process that we face in this country. And I tried to listen to some of the speakers, and I got concerned that I must come and put across my thoughts onto this, that for you to repeal a bill without replacement, there should be a very good reason for it. You cannot repeal a bill and replace it, literally speaking, with regulations. And, Mr. Speaker, regulations are usually drawn from an act of parliament. So you cannot repeal an act of parliament and replace it with regulations. Further, Mr. Speaker, this issue of social assistance is very close to my heart. I remember in the 10th parliament, Mr. Speaker, I'm the one who introduced a motion that gave the elderly people the 2,000 shillings per month. Before that, it was 1,500 shillings without any backing of a motion or anything. But I brought a motion to Parliament, and that is what moved the stipend from 1,500 to 2,000. And again, now it had some legal backing, although it was not an act of Parliament. And later, Mr. Speaker, this social assistance came, and we contributed to it, and we hailed it and supported it. So, Mr. Speaker, if the Leader of Majority brought repealing and replacing it with something else in the law, we would have accepted. But for this one, I hope the Leader of Majority, because it would also look very bad for the Leader of Majority to lose a bill. I think in his seconding, or rather reply, he may wish to withdraw it so that we don't subject the Leader of Majority to unfair treatment. He's the leader of this House. I'm also the leader of the House. And as my colleague, I don't want to appear like shooting down his bill. So I would just want to request the Leader of Majority to consider withdrawing this bill even at this stage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, how I wish when I was moving the bill yesterday, the members who have talked today would have been there, because then they would have understood the rationale for why we need to repeal this bill. And indeed, when the Committee on Labor, who have done all the public participation and come up with the same conclusion that the bill should be repealed, when they presented their report again yesterday. And I think, first of all, I sensed there is perhaps some confusion through the contributions this afternoon that perhaps we are doing away with the Social Assistance Fund or the Social Assistance Program, which is not the case. Indeed, since the introduction of the social assistance, the first experiments in 2004, with 500 people, it's moved now to 1.2 million beneficiaries. So it has grown. And even since the introduction, even before the introduction of this law in 2013, the operation have never stopped because of the lack of this law or the non-operability of this law. And I did mention yesterday that one of the challenges we have been having with this act is, A, the act set up the Social Assistance Authority, which is basically converting the department within a ministry that has been doing this into an authority, right? And this is something that was done with due respect to most government departments for self-perpetuation, not with the intention of necessarily bringing in any efficiencies in the operation of government. So now, as it was preparing to manage this fund, the PM-FEM Act is also very clear in terms of how funds are set up and how they're managed. And they'll be managed together based on the regulations pursuant to the PFM Act. And that's how it's been operating. So basically what we have is we have a whole group of people scattered between the handicapped, the children, the vulnerable, different people at the different ministries, people with disabilities or living differently.
What is out of order, Honorable Sankok?
Honorable Speaker, the least I expect from the majority leader is respect to the persons with disability. Calling us handicapped persons, yet the law is very clear that we should not be referred not in a demeaning manner according to Article 54 of our Constitution. We are persons with disabilities.
Okay. My apologies to...
Majority Leader, you are well informed now.
My apologies. I think I had already quickly changed and I said people living with disabilities. That's the old term, but no disrespect, amen. So basically we have all these groups of people who are the beneficiaries of this social assistance, and they are scattered between different ministries. And what the whole design was to get the whole of government to actually go into the villages and gather all these people through the chiefs, through the different, the DCC's coordination. And then they are registered and provided with the assistance. Now, by creating this into an authority, this one department, you are now giving it like a super authority that will have presence in all the villages to gather this information, because the rest of government will not operate with authority. And those are some of the operational challenges that were found. That when you create this authority, then you need to have it having offices in literally every village where there is a person living with disability, where there's a vulnerable child, where there's another person, for them to collect that information and bring it centrally as an authority. If you're going to use the rest of government to get all this information for the authority, then you don't need the authority. So basically that's the whole thing of what exactly is a compelling case for having the authority. And because you don't have that compelling case for the authority, then you look at what else is within the bill or the act. And as a result, it collapses. Because you can do everything and has been done everything since 2004, and the proof of the pudding is in the eating thereof. It's worked since even 2013. The scale has been scaled to 1.2 million people, and it's been working without an authority. So perhaps there was no compelling need for the authority in the first place anyway. But more importantly, this conflict with the provisions of the PFM and also with the rest of, how does it work with the rest of the government, is also what has led to perhaps the bill may not have been well thought out in the first instance, and hence there's no point in having a statute in the books that does not work. So let's clean it up. Let's repeal all the laws that are necessary. And this is not only one. There will be several others coming in terms of repeal of some of the laws that are in statute books but are not as part of the cleaning up of the laws through the wider government and the law reform people. So I suppose that's basically the real need for the repeal of this. It's not in any way intended to reduce or diminish the value of the social assistance program, but it's meant to ensure that we don't use all the money for social assistance towards paying the overheads of a special authority who is only being created to manage this money. And it could actually end up gobbling the entire amount. And the people who are the beneficiaries will receive nothing. So With those remarks, I beg to reply.
Very well, Honorable Majority Leader. Honorable members, in the circumstances we shall not put the question now. That shall be done in a subsequent time. Next order.
Order number 11, the Tax Appeals Tribunal Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 19 of 2021, second reading.
Leader of the Majority Party.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to move that the Tax Appeals Tribunal Amendment Bill, which is the National Assembly Bill number 19 of 2021, now be read a second time. Honorable Speaker, you will recall that on or around the 7th of November 2020, His Excellency the President, in a recorded address, while marking the National Taxpayers' Day, which is around end of October, usually beginning of November, did direct the National Treasury and the Attorney General to review the legal and the operational framework of the Tax Appeals Tribunal. Also to look at the onward appeals to the superior courts, as well as the provisions for the Tax Procedure Code Act, to ensure that all the various tax disputes are resolved in an efficient manner. So the product of this request is basically this bill, which has the intention of creating an independent tribunal for speedy, efficient, and just determination of tax disputes. And also to accord it with some rulings that have been passed by the courts, because the Constitution does recognize that all tribunals are judicial bodies, and they fall under the judiciary, and I'll come back to that. Honorable Speaker, at the moment, we have about 976 tax disputes. They could have gone up or could have gone down depending on how many have been resolved and how many more have been filed, which are pending before the tribunal. And when you now look at this, it's one of the busiest tribunals within the structure of our quasi-judicial system in Kenya. There is about 34 other tribunals in operation, ranging from the cooperatives tribunal, the rent tribunal, the business premises tribunal. Totally about 34. But the tax appeals tribunal seems to be the most active and the busiest in terms of the workload. Now, this operational challenge has also brought to the fore the fact that it's now currently served by part-time members. And there's the clamor then that with 976 odd cases, can we continue sustainably using part-time members of the tribunal who only come as and when, and obviously with the remuneration structure that was kind of pushed to the tribunal by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, it does not give them enough incentives to be there when they are needed, because they are only paid for so many sittings in a month. And hence, it doesn't even recognize the background work they do in trial research and writing the judgment. So one of the proposals from this review was, can we have them as full-time? And I'll come back to that also later on. Now, another of their institutional challenges is the fact that the tax administrative, the tax appeal tribunal, since its inception, has always been funded by Kenya Revenue Authority. Even the staff are seconded mainly from Kenya Revenue Authority. Now, here is a tribunal which is supposed to be providing independent judgments and fairness to a taxpayer who appears before it. But, and they try to do their best. But the fact that they are funded by Kenya Revenue Authority, it means there's a perception of a person appearing before the tribunal that who pays the piper may call the tune. So even when a judgment is fairly in favor of, or should be in favor of KRA. For justice to be seen to be done, and that perception has always worked against them because of that feeling of, how do I trust a tribunal that is funded by KRA and also that has even staffing at KRA? Now, it doesn't get better because the appointment of the members of the tribunal is also the mandate of the Cabinet Secretary for the Treasury, who also is a beneficiary of the work of the KRA and is obviously desirous of optimizing the revenue collections by KRA. So now, when you look at, again, like I said, within the framework of a new constitution, Article 169 basically says tribunals should be within the jurisdiction of subordinate courts. Now, and these are supervised by the Judicial Service Commission. But our tax tribunal is then put under the jurisdiction of the Treasury, which is obviously against the Constitution. Now, so to remedy part of this, we want to, this bill proposes to amend, Section 4 of the Act, first of all, on the appointment of members of the tribunal, so that by conferring those powers now to the JSC, the Judicial Service Commission, as opposed to the Cabinet Secretary responsible for the Treasury. Also, JSC, it also now proposes the modalities for appointment of those people, so that we don't have, currently, and I know I did it in my time, you would have, people, the stakeholders proposing names and all that, and the minister would appoint. But now, and I think this has been challenged in the courts, and to ensure that we don't have this kind of situation, we now have within the bill the whole process of how the vacancies will be declared, how a panel will be selected, because you're not just appointing lawyers, and I know JSC is very good in appointing lawyers, but then tax matters is not just about the tax law. It's about also the mechanics of the taxation. And typically, any tax appeals tribunal will have lawyers, accountants, economists, and different types of people who will sit there and arbitrate on and hear these cases. So it becomes then necessary to have this panel that will be able to tease out and get from among the different professionals who are required and constitute this panel. And this makes a lot of sense because we avoid the potential, the feeling of, the person appointing has only picked people they like or they love or who play golf with them or who socialize with them, but it's actually through a transparent system and even competitive, if you like. So, I think I've gone through and I don't want to go belaboring the point on how the selection will be done. That's all very contained within the bill, complete with a timeline. And basically, the bottom line is once this panel has done its job, JSC will actually, by notice in the Gazette, be appointing the chairperson and members of the tribunal, as the case may be, basically to complete that process. Now, going to the composition of the tribunal, the bill also proposes to oblige the JSC and the selection panel to ensure that the nominees to the tribunal reflect the interests of all sections of society, comply with Section 10 and 27 of the Constitution, which espouses our national values and principles of governance, equal opportunities for persons with disabilities, and other marginalized communities. All those issues about gender are also part of the requirements within the bill. Honorable Speaker, the bill also seeks to amend the current Section 7 of the Act in relation to the Secretary of the Tribunal by replacing the Cabinet Secretary, who is the appointing authority, and transferring that responsibility to the Public Service Commission. I know there's some issues with this because, again, yes, this is a tribunal under the JSC, and also the thinking was that the Public Service Commission should be the one appointing the authority. I'm aware that the chair of Finance and her committee have had representation from various bodies, and there could well be some amendments to that in terms of how the secretary is appointed and the qualification of the secretary. But more importantly, at least is moving from the cabinet secretary to the treasury to another appointive authority. It also increases the number of years in terms of the experience of the secretary, and in the event, at the interview, to be appointed secretary to the board, if you're a member, if you've been a member of the Kenya Revenue Authority, you are barred from being appointed secretary to the tribunal until the lapse of at least 5 years, which is basically about the same thing we have for people who have been in politics. You cannot be appointed to the IEBC, because how do you go and arbitrate when your history is so fresh with your past employer? Just to protect that independence in terms of the operation. It's also, I think, also basically, the bill is very elaborate in terms of the duties of the secretary, in terms of day-to-day, and also delinking the work of the secretary with the work of the chairperson. So you don't have members and the secretary fighting between executive matters and policy matters. I did mention that the thinking in terms of the coming up with the bill was like, because there are so many cases, why don't we have all the tribunal members being full-time? And that's what the current proposal is in the bill. However, as people have been discussing this bill, I've also had representation since the publication of this bill from people who are professionals serving as a public duty in these tribunals, not just in the tax, because once you do this, it sets the precedence for all the others. Not just in the tax, in the rent tribunal, there are people who are serving on a part-time basis because they can only afford to give only part of their work. And people are also called upon because of specific expertise in terms of the taxation practice, in terms of land estate management, in terms of your knowledge in the cooperative sector or in the SACCO sector, and you're called to serve in the cooperative tribunal. But in the tax especially, we have so many people who are tax practitioners who may be required to serve in this, but they will not relinquish their responsibilities as partners in their accounting practices or as senior managers in their accounting practices to serve on a full-time basis in the tribunal, because they still need to do what they do best to serve other clients. And hence, we will be proposing an amendment to this with the concurrence of the House so that we can have a hybrid of both full-time members as well as part-time to just ensure that those who can be picked on a full-time basis are onboarded, and those who can only be available on a part-time service because of the other commitment, yet their skill is required, can also be accommodated within the framework of the tribunals. Basically, I think the other thing I would like to highlight is I note from the report of the committee that when the judiciary, chief registrar of the judiciary, did appear before the committee, she did bring up an issue that we had not taken on board at the point of drafting the bill, which is that since 2014 and 2015, and I think this is at paragraph 51 of the report of the committee, that yes, Treasury has progressively been transferring the operational budgets of the local tribunals, and it has done for 20 of them. But the transfer has been done by just shifting the budgets to the judiciary. But there's no tribunals operational framework. There's no tribunals management act. So there's money, but the operational, institutional, legal framework does not exist. And I think it's something that's been worked on. I understand work has been going on for the last 3 years or something, but we don't have it in this house. So even as we transfer this function of the tax appeals tribunal to the judiciary, it will suffer the same fate as some of them who have been transferred there, yet the judiciary has then had to revert them back to the line ministries because they don't have the capacity to oversee them, to manage them. They don't have the rooms. These tribunals will require places to sit. They require staff. And that framework has not been there. So it's something we need to have in mind. And I would be urging this House that even as we pass this, we will need to create the transition mechanism so that we don't end up through law transferring this to the judiciary, and then we find they actually don't have the legal framework to manage them, and they return it to Treasury. So I think basically the point we're making here is we will be discussing with the committee, and we'll pass some amendments so that even as we do this, we can either ensure that within our transitional mechanism, we're very clear that these functions are going to be transferred when we have the enabling law in place. Otherwise, we will end up with a situation where we actually don't have, we have a tribunal, we have the law saying it should be at the judiciary, then JSC tell us, fine, thank you for bringing it here, but we don't have the legal framework to house them. So to synchronize the completion of the work that is pending in terms of how you manage tribunals and the transfer of these tribunal functions to the JSC, we will be asking for some transitional mechanism within the bill by the time we complete it. So, Honorable Speaker, this bill has generally made several proposals. It's all geared towards expediting the resolution of tax appeals in the tribunal. And I would really want to urge members that to see it from the lens of the expediency, efficiency, optimum turnaround of the tax appeals tribunal, and which would basically ensure that all those cases that are lying in the tribunals, which potentially mean there's a lot of tax awaiting solution of the matters that are being canvassed at the tribunal. One way or the other, it either releases that liability from the taxpayer or ensures that money moves to the taxpayer. And the clarity in terms of businesses is better so long as we have the workings of these tribunals sorted out. So I would urge that we move with speed. We work on this. At least it will trigger the setting up of the regulations. And most importantly, it will also expedite the process of ensuring that the judiciary and the people who are concerned can come up with the enabling framework so that the baby we are giving to them would actually have a home where it can grow. Before I close, I would also want to take this opportunity to thank the various members of the public who have dedicatedly for a long time been serving in all these tribunals. It's more of service to humanity. It's not because of the money. And they've done a super job, again, within the tax, but also among the other 34 tribunals that are in place, providing quasi-judicial services to the people, with basically people who are quasi-volunteers. So I want to end there. I want to break to second, and I will ask the chair of the Finance Committee, the Honorable Gladys Wanga, to second.
Honorable Wanga.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I rise to second
the Tax Appeals Tribunal Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 19 of 2021, and to thank very much the Majority Leader for introducing this bill, but also for his thorough exposition of the intent of this bill as he was moving. He has actually adequately covered most of the areas that are covered in this bill. So maybe for the record, I'll just state that this bill went through the first reading on 8 June 2021 and was thereafter committed to the committee, the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning, for review and report to the House pursuant to Article Standing Order 127. Honorable Speaker, as the Majority Leader has explained very thoroughly, the current Tax Appeals Tribunal is hosted by the Kenya Revenue Authority, and the authority is responsible for facilitating operations of the Tax Appeals Tribunal by providing budgetary allocation, office space, general infrastructural requirements. The Secretariat of the Tribunal is deployed from KRA, as the Act is not explicit on the manner of recruitment of the staff. Therefore, this, of course, has created a perception of conflict of interest, because when you are going to the tribunal, you are in conflict with KRA. If the tribunal itself is facilitated by KRA, then there is the view that you probably will not get adequate justice. But importantly, the Tax Appeals Tribunal is among the 34 tribunals that were to be regularized in compliance with the High Court judgment delivered on 11th March 2021. That was petition number 197 of 2018, Okio Mtata versus JSC, the AG, Parliament, and Katiba Institute, challenging the constitution, composition, and operations of local tribunals in Kenya. The petitioner had sought the declaration that local tribunals established pursuant to Article 169(1)(d) of the Constitution are not part of the executive, nor are they independent adjudicatory bodies, but they are subordinate courts. So the High Court rendered its decision by declaring that local tribunals created under Article 169(1)(d) are actually subordinate courts. As such, appointment and removal of members of the tribunals by the executive violates the principle of separation of powers and contravenes the right to fair hearing under Article 50 of the Constitution and infringes on the right on the independence of the judiciary. Honorable Speaker, therefore, this introduction of this bill by the Majority Leader is in direction of the court, so that we regularize the Tax Appeals Tribunal, but I'm sure that the Majority Leader is also considering, because I know that there is a bill that is in process to regularize not just the Tax Appeals Tribunal, but all the other 33 remaining tribunals, and to move them so that we can actually comply with that decision of the High Court. Honorable Speaker, many times this House is accused of not honoring court decisions. This is one example. You realize that this decision was only rendered in March, and now in September we are already midway through the legislative process of complying with the decision of the High Court. And therefore, those who accuse Parliament of not honoring or being in conflict or feeling like they are above the law, I think they should see that Parliament actually strives at all times to operate within the dictates of the Constitution, but also to honor decisions of the court. And this is in display here. Honorable Speaker, this bill has 18 clauses, and it seeks to amend the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act of 2013. Clause 2 seeks to repeal Section 4 of the Act and to substitute it with a new section to provide for composition of members of the tribunal appointed by the JSC. The clause further seeks to amend the Act by introducing new sections 4A and 4B, providing for qualification of members of the tribunal and appointment procedures. The third clause, Honorable Speaker, seeks to amend Section 5 of the Act to provide that service by the chairperson and members of the tribunal shall be on full-time basis. The Majority Leader explained that we have a huge backlog of cases within these tribunals. And the fact that the tribunal has been operating part-time has partly contributed to this backlog. Honorable Speaker, having members of the tribunal on full-time basis will help clear the current backlog of 500 unheard appeals. We currently have 500 appeals that are yet to be heard before this particular tribunal, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, we want to urge that after this law is passed and these members of the tribunal are operating on a full-time basis, then they should work on expediting hearing of these cases. Because what cases are taken before the tribunal? They are huge tax disputes. And you probably have a tax dispute of a large sum of money, and you have to wait for 2 years or 3 years before it is heard, yet the value of that sum remains the same. This is the true demonstration of the fact that justice delayed is actually justice denied. In that front, the committee actually supports the action of making the members of the tribunal full-time, but not full-time to rest, full-time to process cases. I had the other day the interview by the Chief Justice, Martha Koome, and she said that one of her biggest priorities is reducing the backlog within the judiciary. Actually, that is a huge priority and an important priority, and I'd like to encourage her, now that even these tribunals are going to the JSC, for her to actually undertake to expedite these cases. Honorable Speaker, Clause 4 of the bill contains a proposal to amend the Act by repealing the current Section 7 and replacing it with a new Section 7. The new Section 7 provides for staff of the tribunal, including the Secretary to the tribunal, to be appointed by the Public Service Commission. Honorable Speaker, the committee has a different view on this particular clause, and later on I'll be speaking to the proposals that were given through public participation, and some of which the committee agrees with, as far as appointment of the staff of the tribunal are concerned. Because if you have the Judicial Service Commission, why would you have the Public Service Commission appointing staff to a judicial body? It's like asking parliamentary staff to be appointed by the Public Service Commission, yet you have a standing Parliamentary Service Commission that is responsible for staff of Parliament constitutionally. Honorable Speaker, Clause 5 seeks to amend the Act by introducing Section 7A. The new section provides for functions of the Secretary to the Tribunal that include day-to-day management of the affairs of the Tribunal, keeping proper records of tax appeals filed, judgment delivered and tax appeals settled out of the Tribunal, and under the guidance of the chairperson, providing strategic leadership of the Tribunal and the Secretariat. Honorable Speaker, those are some of the fundamental clauses and issues that have been raised by the bill. Honorable Speaker, as far as public participation is concerned, and I put this on record because many times it is said that it is very, very interesting that many times you meet people, they say that Parliament did not conduct public participation on this matter. Yet, it is important to note that on every matter that comes before this House, the biggest priority and perhaps the biggest expense of time by committees of this House is on public participation. So sometimes you see people do not take interest in the bill, but after it has been processed, they come back and say, but you did not conduct public participation. So I want to urge the public that Parliament, of course, will not be walking door to door to every person asking their view on a particular matter. So members of the public, if interested in a particular issue, must take interest and follow on the dailies, on the internet, and come and provide their views. Because lawmaking is a joint effort. Everybody's views counts. But also public participation does not mean that we agree. It doesn't connotate concurrence, but the fact that your views are listened to and they are recorded. Honorable Speaker, following the advert on this bill, the committee discussed this bill with stakeholders on Thursday, 29th July at Hilton Garden in Machakos, and several stakeholders attended the meeting. And allow me to thank dedicated stakeholders whose valuable contribution led to the production of the committee's report. And these include ISPAC. ISPAC are a very consistent contributor on every legislation, and I really thank and congratulate them. We also had the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Kolibali Associates, the Law Society of Kenya, National Treasury and Planning, KRA themselves, the Judiciary, and the Institute of Certified Public Secretaries. So in general, the stakeholders welcomed the amendments proposed in the bill, with majority of them opposing the recruitment of staff of the tribunal by the Public Service Commission and the setting of salaries for the chairperson and members of the tribunal by the Cabinet Secretary. A proposal was made by some stakeholders to stagger appointment of members of the tribunal so as to ensure that the tribunal does not have any vacant positions at any given time. So as I mentioned earlier, if the tribunals have been found to be subsidiary courts, then appointment or recruitment of staff should be done by the JSC. And those are proposals that are going to be moved by the committee during the committee stage. The proposal to have the tribunal's funds appropriated by Parliament and to receive funding through grants, donations, and bequests was also opposed by some stakeholders. The stakeholders' comments on the bill are contained in Part 3 of the report, and all stakeholders' comments were considered by the committee while making determination on amendments. Honorable Speaker, this issue of funding directly to the tribunal has no mechanism for expending money. Therefore, money for the tribunal should be appropriated to the JSC, and therefore the tribunal is funded just like all the other courts are funded. So that particular section of the bill will be reviewed, or amendments will be proposed by the committee, so that there is the tribunal has no legs to stand on as far as funding is concerned. Honorable Speaker, while considering the bill, the committee observed that whereas the bill seeks to comply with the decision of the High Court, there were still some areas that may not entirely have complied with. And I've already spoken to the issue of the staff of the tribunal being recruited by the PSC. The committee was of the view that the role of appointment of secretary and staff, of course, should be by the JSC. And local tribunals being under the JSC, management of staff, service in them must be done by the JSC. But the bill as currently framed, it would be difficult for JSC to discipline staff appointed by the PSC. The committee further observed that the determination and remuneration and payment of expenses for the chairperson and members of the tribunal is to be undertaken by the cabinet secretary in consultation with SRC. Committee was of the view that this would amount to interference of the judiciary by the executive, which was against the intention of the court ruling. To this end, the committee will propose amendments to the bill to remedy and address the anomalies. Honorable Speaker, it is worth noting that enactment of this bill will increase efficiency of the tribunal because we now have full-time members. The backlog will no longer be necessary. A membership is proposed of 15 to 20 members, which means the tribunal should now be able to constitute many panels to dispense of appeals. Honorable Speaker, from a finance committee's perspective, we also see this as being beneficial to revenue collection because with 500 unheard appeals, as much as the people who have lodged appeals are having money held, there's also a lot of revenue that is held up by this kind of backlog. And therefore, this efficiency that is going to be created by this new structure should be able to unlock much needed revenue for provision of services by the government. Honorable Speaker, the majority leader spoke to the issue of transition, and I agree with him that we should have a transition mechanism, timelines and so on, so that we do not leave a lacuna there that will lead to disruption of services. Honorable Speaker, with those many remarks, I want to thank members of the Finance Committee for their dedication to this process. I also thank the majority leader and thank members of this House for their support, and the clerk and the Speaker. With those many remarks, I beg to second.
Honorable members, I will pose a question, which is that the Tax Appeals Tribunal Amendment Bill. Honorable, what did I say? I propose the question. I guess that is the Tax Appeals Tribunal Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 19 of 2021. Those who have registered the interest to speak. Oh, what did I say? Honorable members, it was quite an afternoon. quite an afternoon. Honorable Kwenye, you can't be, the speaker cannot be out of. Yeah, I want to carry that again. Honorable members. That the Tax Appeals Tribunal Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 19 of 2021 be now read a second time. Now we are in order, honorable members. We shall give to Honorable Obara Akinyi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to speak. And at onset, I want to support the amendment for the following reasons. One is that the amendment recognizes the Judicial Service Commission as the appointing authority in line with the High Court judgment, which held that tribunals fall under the judiciary, has been clearly also articulated by the chair. Secondly, the amendment also gives the judiciary powers to directly appoint and gazette the members of the tribunal, which solves the problems witnessed in the past where the executive would decline to gazette appointments made by the judiciary. Three, tribunal secretary who will be in charge of operations and policy, therefore, I believe will improve efficiency. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I've looked at clause 16 and I seem to think that it is hanging and it needs to be looked at again by the committee. Thank you. Once again, I support. Thank you.
Honorable Oresan Kok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this bill 100%. Honorable Speaker, I thank the Leader of Majority, but more so to the Committee of Finance led by Honorable Gladys Wanga. Is it normally Nyasukuta, or what is the other name? Nyasuna. Honorable Speaker, she is the Minister of Finance and the first ever person from not the ruling side to be a chairman of the Finance Committee. Honorable Speaker, now that we are discussing the tax tribunal amendment bill, we now know where tax laws are domiciled in this National Assembly. Honorable Speaker, I support because tax disputes are not only scary to investors, time-consuming, and sometimes are not resolved in a manner that will allow Kenyans to be confident in paying taxes, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we have 900 appeals, as said by the Honorable Majority Leader, Honorable Amos Kimunya, who was himself at one time the Finance Minister, and I know he knew what was going on in those appeals, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, and when we have appeals against KRA, Honorable Speaker, it is a dispute between the citizen or taxpayers and KRA, because it is KRA that collect taxes on behalf of Treasury. Honorable Speaker, when it is KRA paying salaries of the members of the tribunal, when it is KRA that appoint members of the tribunal, when the members of the tribunal sit within the buildings of KRA, and also the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury is the appointing authority, Honorable Speaker, then the citizen may not be confident of finding justice. Honorable Speaker, it will be very difficult for a goat to find justice in a panel of hyenas. Honorable Speaker, Treasury and KRA are interested parties in such dispute. So when we amend the bill, the tax tribunal bill, so that the members of the tribunal are appointed by GSC, Honorable Speaker, I think I support 100%, so that we can delink the interested parties, so that there will be no conflict of interest in resolving such disputes, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, again, when we have full-time membership, so that this appeal will not stagger for a long time. Honorable Speaker, business people are the ones that know time is money. And some of them are not Kenyans. They are just taxpayers, but are foreign investors. When you consume their time, when they go back to their country, only to appear in tribunal, maybe after 1 month, and then after another 1 month, 1 year goes about, while they are not being resolved, Honorable Speaker, you will scare away those investors, Honorable Speaker. And scaring away investors mean our tax base keep on shrinking. Honorable Speaker, Kenyans are also not confident in finding justice in a tribunal that is domiciled within Treasury or KRA. And when that happens, then most of them hide their businesses and their incomes, Honorable Speaker, and end up not paying the taxes. But if they are confident that in case there is a dispute or there is miscalculation, because human beings are to error, and we know even the KRA people are also human beings, and they are open to some little errors, Honorable Speaker, then if they are confident that they can find justice in the appeal system, they will be able to declare all their sources of income. They will be able to declare all their businesses, and Honorable Speaker, then we will increase people paying taxes. The tax base will widen, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, when it is Treasury and KRA, again, appointing authority and paying masters for the members of the tribunal, we run at a risk of weaponizing politically even the collection of taxes and such appeal, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we have seen in the recent past where whenever you differ with the powers that be, then the next day you will either receive ESCC, KRA, or DCI, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, our refuge has been the judiciary. And bringing them in now in the appointment of this tax tribunal, Honorable Speaker, will be a refuge to all those who are being fought politically using arms of government like KRA. Honorable Speaker, people, especially politicians, have been hiding their earnings. Some of them have been hiding their businesses. They cannot declare in this country, Honorable Speaker. And sometimes even going outside this country and investing outside the country because they fear that they will never get justice within KRA and within the appeal tribunal. Honorable Speaker, you have heard of offshore banking, Kenyans running away with their money outside this country. Some of the laws that, like this one, where the tax tribunal was domiciled within KRA, are some of them that were scaring these people, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, there was a time that KRA was looking at your electricity bills, looking at the tokens that you are paying, your electricity meters. How many do you have? And then all of a sudden, they will start saying you have not declared your rental income. Honorable Speaker, and you know from where we come from the rural areas. Your mother may not be educated, your father may not be educated, you may have a small pig farm, Honorable Speaker, you may have some chicken here and there, Honorable Speaker, and you connect them to electricity. The moment you have more than 10 electricity connection, Honorable Speaker, KRA will come to your neck, Honorable Speaker. If there was an appeal tribunal that is so independent, that is domiciled in the judiciary, Honorable Speaker, we will not have any problem because we'll go to the tribunal, confidently explain that because my brother is not educated, he used my ID, or they don't yet have the PIN number, so they have used my PIN number, so that is why the name is I have so many tokens or electricity connection, not that I have rental houses, Honorable Speaker. There was a very big assumption on that, and very many Kenyans may not be declaring rental income. Some of them have registered in the name of their friends or brothers or so on, because they know that they will not get justice because of such law. So amending this law is very important for this House, Honorable Speaker, and that is why I really support. Honorable Speaker, there is also a place, Honorable Speaker, in this bill that say in the appointment of the members of this tribunal who will be 15 and above, I don't know, 15 to a certain number, Honorable Speaker, then we should not only appoint lawyers because we are in judiciary, we should appoint all technical people because tax laws go beyond legal matters. Some are financial matters, and we will be able to have people like Honorable Mbadi sitting there, who is a very well-known accountant and finance person, Honorable Speaker. So this one is very important, and I urge my colleagues in this House that for the sake of all of us and for the sake of broadening the tax base in this country, let us fully support this bill and pass it as soon as possible, And once we have passed it as soon as possible, we'll request the majority leader to take it to the president for assent and being operationalized as soon as possible. Even if we have that particular period, but we will like this one to start working as soon as possible. I support 100%.
Honorable Martin Oino.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this bill, which is timely. Also, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the committee for the good work they have done. And I want to start by saying that, Mr. Speaker, if Sankok owes money to me, and I'm the one who dictates, and I'm the one who established tribunal, it will not work that way, because it's all centered in me. So the interest may be skewed. And Mr. Speaker, that is what has been happening in the KRA. And many people are frustrated. And out of that frustration, a lot has led to harassment and psychosocial, even economical issues. Mr. Speaker, even businesses have closed because some cases protract for years. It has also led to a lot of bankruptcy, lots of job losses, and tax evasion. If you cannot breathe, they will always find a way on how to survive. Thank you. So, Mr. Speaker, I like the purpose, the objective of this bill, because it's trying to expedite the conflicts and resolutions. When that is done, what it will bring to the revenue collection is that we will have more revenue being collected. If it is done out of malice, avoid all self-interest, which we know is anchored in the KRA, and now that will be independent. So we are talking of a bill that will also increase revenue to our coffer. The other point which I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is we all establish these bodies, but if we are not careful on how we recruit staff to work in them, it may not work. That's why I agree with the amendment which is being made that all the staffing and remuneration of the staff be aligned to the JSC, because tribunals, in another word, is quasi-judicial functions, which should only fit in the Judicial Service Commission. So if another person appoints the team or recruits the staff, how will they then supervise them and make them effective? So I look forward to seeing that amendment. But I think this is a very timely bill. It will help a lot of conflicts which is there. Some take too long for no good reason. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I support and I urge the House to pass this bill as quickly as possible so that we can have some resolution to these conflicts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable, before I get to Honorable Adipo, let's get Honorable Idikiri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this bill. It's true, we need an independent body to be arbitrating between the complainants and the KLA. It's common sense that you cannot be a prosecutor and at the same time the judge, which has been the norm within KLA. Mr. Speaker, if we get experts from all the fields, from all the industries, from all the professions, we should be able to have a very well-balanced tribunal that will be ready and easily accessible by the citizens of this country. I agree KRA has been operating as a monopoly in terms of tax issues, and whenever there is a problem, you're either thrown into the police cells or taken to court for things which are not even related to failure to pay taxes. For example, Mr. Speaker, when I was employed, I used to pay taxes through my employer. And there was a time when the KRA system went off. I was forced to go back and provide documents which were not very easily accessible, and I needed tax compliance. I did not know where to go to put my case. Mr. Speaker, I was forced to pay some amount, although I knew and paid. But if there was an independent body that I could go and present my problem, I'm sure my matter would have been solved. This brings to mind that there are so many other Kenyans who would be, Mr. Speaker, having a similar problem. Mr. Speaker, we need independent bodies to be checking some of these quasi-government and government activities. Mr. Speaker, we have an animal in KRA, it's true, and we need an alternative dispute resolution mechanism, which I believe will be provided by this tribunal. Mr. Speaker, Kenyans wake up in the morning and taxes are being charged on them. Yesterday we spent the whole day talking about the increase in fuel prices. And there's a whole list of taxes. There are a whole list of levies which are accompanying the VAT. And nobody, we could not get anywhere to go and do an appeal. If we had a tax tribunal, we would have taken that matter to the tribunal, but we don't have. We can only revert back again to KRA. So, Mr. Speaker, I think this bill is coming the right time. How I pray that once this bill, that the amendment be made that this tribunal need to be regionalized, such that we don't have a centralized tribunal which is only operating in Nairobi. We need a tribunal that can be in every county. There is a possibility of having an office in every county. So as the bill is being done, we need to look at the distribution of centers of where our people will go and launch complaints. Because if we let it be at the end office, Nairobi, we still have a problem, because majority of our Kenyans will not be able to afford to come to Nairobi. Let's make it accessible at the county offices or at least the regional office. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill has come the right time. I support it. And urge that the drafters please to consider that the tribunal has branches throughout the country. I know that's an operational issue, but I think at this stage we need also to incorporate that aspect into the final draft of the bill. So, Mr. Speaker, I support the formation of the tax tribunal. It's going to sort out a major problem in arbitration. It's going to ease congestion from the courts, because when people are aggrieved, they will rush to court. So I think that aspect is also going to, the tribunal is going to be an alternative dispute resolution. And to me, I think they'll be more accessible and faster in sorting the problem as compared to the judiciary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the bill.
Honorable Adipo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me the opportunity. I'm sorry there is something wrong with my card, because you said you couldn't see my registration, but here it is showing. Now, I rise to support the bill. I'm a member of the Finance and the National Planning Committee, and I'm grateful that our chairman has ably elaborated what we actually agreed on. Now, complaints arose. KRA was taken to court. Ukeo Mutata did that and the rest. Delays have been there in solving tax problems with the payers. And therefore, whatever we are doing is in response to those complaints, as well as being responsible, responding to what needs are. The JSC is going to be an independent body that can arbitrate between the taxpayer and the tax authority itself, KRA. That way, people will have confidence in knowing that whatever they are going to pay is justified and is in need and is in compliance with the law. This is why this bill is very, very important, because it will take care of both sides. The government needs revenue, we can't be unfair to them. And the taxpayer needs money, so we need to ask him to pay what is justified. The employees are going to be independent too, because they are not going to be KRA employees. They are going to be employees who are really for justice to both sides. Mr. Speaker, sir, this bill is very important. I support it, and I believe Kenyans will be happy to see that we are trying to do something that will be helping to them. I know outside there, people have complained about taxation quite considerably, but for the first time, I think this one will be one that they can support and say they are happy with Parliament and the action Parliament has taken. Mr. Speaker, sir, with those few remarks, I want to emphasize that I support, and I urge the House to support this bill so that we can move forward for the good of us all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Majority now end the conversation with the consultation with Honorable Bwanga so that you reply.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I'm very delighted to notice this afternoon, first of all, in terms of the quality of the debate, the support by the members, and on a matter that touches on us, my only disappointment is obviously that the House, the whole essence of Parliament was about taxation and no representation, no taxation without representation, matters finance. But it does appear that the whole issue of taxation is a very difficult topic. It's a very difficult subject. So most of the people would rather keep away than want to come and not be sure what they want to say. But I must thank Honorable Gladys Wanga and her committee because, again, not all of them are finance people, but they've really gotten the grasp of the issues and the principles of taxation, the fair taxation. And you can see from the quality of the report, you can see from the presentations, and hence I really want to thank the members who have endured this afternoon as we went through this. And I am glad that this bill will make it to the next step in the course of, probably within the course of this mini session, so that we can, at least open the door for other tribunals to now have their laws revised to accord with the ruling of the court and with the Article 169 of the Constitution by placing them under the judiciary. This is really a test case. If we get this one right, all the others should follow quite easily. And I'm happy that members have supported this bill so well this afternoon. I want to thank you, Honorable Speaker, also for your patience in this matter, and our secretariat, our technical team, for being there for us today. With those remarks, I beg to reply.
Honorable members, we will stupid putting the question on that particular item to a subsequent time when we have the numbers. Next order.
Honor number 12, the Landlord and Tenant Bill, National Assembly Bill number 3 of 2021, second reading.
Honorable Speaker, again, this is a very weighty bill. It affects everyone who is either a tenant or a landlord, and there's been some consultation and pressure from some people that we move it next week so they have enough time to look through it. And also the chair of the Committee on Housing just came to say, please make sure that you give me an opportunity to look at this in the course of next week. So I would ask that we step it down for the convenience of the House, that we don't use 15 minutes to move it. And similarly, the business also appearing after that, the health laws. These are very crucial bills that I would like to prosecute when we have a bigger number in the House.
Okay, majority, it is so ordered. It is stepped down. But I don't want you to put it together with the next. The next we must call it so that then you speak to it individually. Next order.
Honor number 13, the Health Laws Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2021, second reading.
Leader of the Majority Party.
Indeed, Honorable Speaker, the Health Laws Amendment Bill, again, is one of these bills where the committee is yet to table the report. And it's also been one of there's been lots of consultation between the ministry, the committee, and they've also appealed that we give them until this weekend so that they can table the report hopefully on Tuesday, and then we can start the debate so that members have the benefit of the views of the committee and what came up from public participation as they contribute to the bill. So again, this is more from the point of view of the report not being there, not the convenience of the House. So it's if you beg your indulgence that we also step it down until we have the report on the floor of the House.
Okay, majority, we'll step that down. It is so ordered until it is next rescheduled by the House Business Committee. Honorable members, the time being 6:48 p.m., this House started adjourned until Thursday, 23rd September 2021 at 2:30 p.m.